Good afternoon, everyone. Item 2.01, interviews for superintendent. A portion of such interviews may be held in executive session pursuant to LARS 4217A1. So just like yesterday, we have three applicants that will be interviewing today. We're going to have the same process. Each applicant will have a 5-minute introduction. After their 5-minute introduction, we will start over here with Mr. Slack and move around the horseshoe, each board member asking one question. And then Ms. Bales will ask 2 questions that were submitted from the public. And then the applicant will have a 5-minute closing statement. And that will conclude the first applicant. We will take a 5 to 10 minute break in between each one. And then after the final interview, we will take a 10 to 15 minute break and come back, and at that time we will vote for the final 2. So at this time, Ms. Poole, we are ready for our first interview, which is Mr. Brian T. Bengali. Good afternoon, Mr. Bingley. I'm going to go through the kind of what's going to happen as far as how the process of the interview is. That way you'll know what's going to happen. You have a 5-minute opening remarks. After the 5-minute opening remarks, we'll start right here with Mr. Slack. He'll ask you the first question. He'll ask you the first question. Once the board members have asked you their question,
I'd like to talk about 3 things within that career that I think are particularly as it relates to the challenges here in motion. First thing is, as an area superintendent in Fairfax, Virginia, one of our schools was Fort Belvoir Elementary, 1,500 elementary But following those principalships, and I had served as a teacher and a department chair and assistant principal, but I had several central office experiences with ascending responsibility in very different and diverse school districts, where I had the opportunity to supervise and support the growth of principals and coordinators and directors and assistant superintendents. I really love that part of the work. I think it's important building the capacity of those who serve, and I think that's one of the themes that will probably show up in a lot of my remarks. And third, and probably most importantly, if you measure success based on customer satisfaction, teachers, parents, students, employees, and better opportunities and outcomes for the children we serve, then we have been successful everywhere I've been. Everywhere. And if you believe in the causality of economic poverty and test score negative correlation, meaning when poverty goes up, test scores go down. If you believe in the causality of that, which I don't, and we should never, but if you did, then it would suggest that we shouldn't have had success in any of those places. So, despite the fact that they were very different, the formula pretty much was the same, and that was create a high-performance, learning, innovative, professional teaching culture. And I think that'll be another big part of theme of a lot of my responses this evening. On a personal note, I am proud. I have a daughter who is in a month going to graduate from college with a nursing degree. She's got a big heart and a desire to help mankind. We're very proud of her. I've been married to Sherry, my wife, through this whole entire administrative journey, and I try to find balance, and she knows that, but she also knows that I can't do this work any other way. But she herself has a background in a lot of nonprofit work, particularly for humane animal services, and to a lesser extent, impoverished children. So we would be a 2-for-1 special for the community if that matters. But with that, I just thank you for the opportunity, and I'll maybe save some of my 5 minutes to go through all the answers that we have. But thank you again for the opportunity.
Thank you very much. And we'll get started with you, Mr. Slack.
Thank you, Doctor. It's Tony. I think you pronounced it.
Yeah, Bingley. Those middle school kids, when I was principal, when people would visit, they knew it rhymed with jingle, so they would always tell them that. So that helped. Yeah.
Welcome to Bowling Green. I have one question for you. If your application is successful, where you will reside on a full-time basis.
Oh, without question. That wife of mine, Sherry, she's done burning up the internet already. So yeah, absolutely. We would love to be immersed in the community, and there would be no question about that. I guess we can save time on this answer because the answer is yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Mr. Bullock?
Thank you, Mr. President. What experience do you have in dealing with litigation issues? Have you ever been named in a lawsuit related to your employment as an educator, either in your official capacity or as an individual? Are you currently involved in any litigation issues, either as a plaintiff or a defendant, either personally or in your professional capacity?
The answer is no. I'm not in any litigation, and I've never been personally the target of any litigation. Now, certainly as superintendent, as well as in several positions, I've been involved. I was involved in Brevard County, Florida, which had the Kennedy Space Center, which was really cool till the space shuttle program went away and took 20,000 jobs with it. And so the reality is when people leave, they take their children with them. And so we closed 3 schools there, and there was actually litigation brought, which wasn't successful, to try to get injunction to stop us from closing those schools. But So I was involved in that process where I just testified why we needed to do that from a budget standpoint and to use our capacity more effectively. Those really are the ones that I can think of, primarily, generally some due process exceptional education issues where I've had to testify, is what I can think of.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Sir?
We certainly appreciate your time and the drive over here. My question is fairly simple. We think we have several good candidates for this position. How would you convince us that you are the right person for this job?
All right, well, if there's a question, what do you know about Bossier Parish, maybe this will be a 2-for-1 answer as well. I've really studied a lot about the positive things that exist here. I generally feel like people feel pretty good about our programming and our facilities and things like that. But I think that some of the challenges it appears that we have, I think that I'm a good fit for those things. Let me start. One is you don't have to watch too many meetings to know that we want to make sure that we are able to maintain and retain quality, high professional educators. That's been a concern that you've voiced, and quite frankly, the data bear that out. Not only did one of your own teachers give you qualitative data that's pretty concerning, that 76% of our teachers are really thinking about going elsewhere. But if you look at your turnover data, especially 2 to 5 year teachers, it's not good and well behind the state average, and that creates a churn circumstance that really is not only not efficient from a dollar standpoint, but it harms productivity. So I mentioned that in places, I'll go back to Brevard, we had huge budget challenges there. And we had to capture a lot of efficiencies, go line by line through our budget to be able to maintain positions and give whatever compensation we could. But beyond that, we just created a professional teaching culture where we gave teachers ownership in school improvement planning. We gave them ownership in their own evaluation, which, by the way, Florida did the same thing that Louisiana did, and that's at 50-50, part of it on test scores, part of it on professional practices. But Florida was even worse, quite frankly. But we did a great job giving our teachers real ownership in that 50% of the professional practices, half of the evaluation. And despite never building a budget where we didn't cut operating dollars, the last 3 years in Brevard, our teacher turnover rate was below 10%. And it was also declining in Plano when I left for the same reason. We really, I think that's a strength, bringing really teacher ownership and leadership into the equation. I guess that's really the primary thing as I've studied. I think that there's a desire to make sure we have a good, rigorous, and relevant curriculum everywhere. So, I've had experience. I was an executive director of curriculum instruction. I was promoted from middle director to that, and then really worked. And again, coupling that with teacher leadership, having teacher champions that can work with curriculum coordinators to create quality curriculum materials in both Plano and in Brevard, especially in Plano. Our teachers had access to the high quality materials, produced a lot of them by their own colleagues, and that's cheaper than if you buy them from vendors, quite frankly, and you validate the work of your own champion educators. I think that there's I read a little bit desire to be a little better with formative assessment work and make sure that, we're using that in a way that helps us be better in our methodology, not just to tell us, where kids are not successful and, what do we do with that information. I think the final thing I would say to you is that I looked at school improvement planning here, and, most of the strengths and weaknesses as well as the goals, they're kind of written in terms of test scores, and I understand that's important, but the challenge, those are outcomes. And by the way, they're not the only outcomes. If we should measure ourselves in a much more multi-metric way. If we want more for our kids than test results, we want to measure more than that. But the fact of the matter is, when the outcome becomes the goal, too often what that means is then instead of being really strategic about how we can improve our practice and our programming and our methodology, we just, from a strategy standpoint, we put down programs like Google Classroom and things like that, and then we demand compliance. Well, you go back to the culture that has teachers wanting to stay with you, that's not it. As opposed to goals that are about giving people ownership, where can we be better? And that's okay, let's say that. And then let's go get it and create professional learning opportunities where teachers learn with and from each other to make a difference. I think that's something that I would bring to the table here, because those two go hand in glove, I believe.
Thank you.
Oh, finally, I'll buy some time back from the first two questions. You know, part of the success we've had, I don't know if there's a gap closing question, but we, you know, our economically disadvantaged kids here are certainly not performing as well as their non-economically disadvantaged peers, and that's not unique. If closing that gap was easy, we'd all do it. But the fact of the matter is, while our kids generally outperform the state average by a lot, our economically disadvantaged kids outperform economically disadvantaged peers in Louisiana by just very little. So if you look at some of the data that I sent you, we've had pretty good success in closing some of those gaps, not only with state testing, but with AP and IB and Cambridge and things like that. So I feel like that's another thing that I could probably help. Yes.
Mr. Wiggins?
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. B.
Yes, sir. That's what the
Good
kids
evening
just
and
called me.
welcome from me. What will you do to attract and retain the quality of teachers that have always been the hallmark and success of our basic Bush repair school system, and at the same time increase diversity significantly?
Okay. Well, on the front end, you want to be as creative and strategic as you can be in your recruitment practices, and that means particularly with some of your higher ed partners. You know, can you work to build good residency programs, for instance, in exceptional education, which is a very difficult staffing. If we have aides whose heart are in the right place and who have skill, it's worth creating a residency program for them to pay for their ongoing education in return for commitment to service as a teacher back in Bossier Parish. And be creative about where you're recruiting, and that means capturing data along the way. As our teachers, if we see who emerges as high quality candidates, you might find that certain universities seem to produce students that tend to match our belief system and our skill set. So being very strategic and effective in your recruiting, but more than anything else, and I may sound like a one-trick pony as I go back to culture, but University of Virginia and Michigan State, a little over a year ago, released a big study with 0 to 5 year teachers. And the reality was that if they landed in a school where the culture was non-collaborative, or even worse, toxic and somewhat negative, I mean, they just had almost no chance of going through to their 5th year of teaching. On the flip side, if they went into a school that was collaborative, where teachers were positive, they cared about each other and they cared about the mission, they had a great chance. Even in the absence of good mentoring or onboarding programs. So it is about culture. It really is, in making sure, and I will tell you, that culture then spreads out to our teachers are with teachers from other places. When the culture here becomes one that gives teachers that kind of ownership and learning with and from each other that I talked about, you start becoming a destination district for teachers that want to be a part of something great. And, you know, that's just simply how we accomplish that in the districts where I've been. As it relates to, you know, more minority recruitment, you know, I mean, again, you get strategic. I have a degree from a historically black college, actually. You know, you recruit in places where you know you can find both talent and some minority candidates, and then strengthen them and give them leadership opportunities as well within the district. So always looking for teacher champions.
Appreciate it. Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Ms. Darby?
Good evening, Mr. B, and welcome to Bossier City, and we appreciate you for taking out your time to come in.
It's great to be here. Thank you.
This question, you probably answered, I'm sure you've answered some of it, but I want to go ahead and ask it because I want you to expound a little bit more on it.
Okay.
How will the students, faculty, and staff benefit from you being our superintendent?
Well, let's talk about faculty and staff. One thing I didn't mention from a staff standpoint, as we built, well, let me back up. Let me start with our, one of the things that we did in both Brevard and Plano, and that I would want to ask a group of teacher champions here, is where does teacher evaluation build capacity? That's the goal of teacher evaluation. And if it doesn't, then how can we make it better? And what we generally found was, you know, let us do good, reflective, quality goal setting and help us learn based on what we say we want to do. And then as we get feedback, make it good, actionable feedback, and from not only administrators, but from my peers, and create a professional culture where that exists. Now, once we did that, we also brought goal setting into the mix for all employees. I mean, it doesn't matter where you are. If you are a cafeteria worker, a custodian, if your job is important, and it must be or you wouldn't be here. That was surely the case in Florida when we had to cut $63 million in operating budget. Then it's important for you, like anyone else, to learn how to do that better, and how can we help you learn to do those things better. People value that and appreciate it. I will tell you that in districts, Brevard, Florida had 73,000 students, and I committed to visiting every classroom every year. And that wasn't really to evaluate anybody. That was, you feel the culture of a school when you're in there. But as much as anything else, I asked every teacher how they were doing, because I wanted to know that it mattered. And, you know, I think that's another way you help build a 10% teacher turnover rate. As far as our students go, you know, when you build that kind of culture, they win. I always say when we did school improvement planning that was meaningful, when the big people work like that, the little people win. And, but you know, we will also care a lot about their social emotional wellness, that they attack 21st century skills. If you want someone who will focus nothing on state testing, I am not your person. I will tell you, in Florida, when we went and visited a district that was better than us in state testing, but they were all testing all the time. I came back and I told our community and I told our board, we're all going to send kids across the stage in May. And I promise you, theirs can't compete against ours. I promise you that. Now, it turned out Florida changed their evaluation system, school grading, to be much more multi-metric than it had been. And the next thing I knew, we were third in the state out of 67 school districts, because we were committed to making sure our kids had the benefit of 21st century skills, industry certification, AP, IB. We were going to measure all those things, and we did. And that's where our kids gained. Yes. We drove down their discipline data, by the way, too. I mean, when you're good on one part, you're also good on the other.
A quick housekeeping note
Uh-oh.
that was passed to me. Board members, when you're asking a question, please almost eat the microphone. They can't hear us when we're asking these questions, so please make sure you pull your mic down and speak a little bit better. Mr. Vanberg?
We good? Thanks for coming this evening. Thanks for your interest in our position here at Bossier Parish Schools.
Glad to be here.
My question is, you're probably aware in Louisiana that we're still working under roughly the same MFP from the state level for many years, but are doing much more for our students. Cost of health care is on the climb, cost of curriculum is increasing, so on, so on, so on.
Mm-hmm.
So like you've got some adventures in this, so this creates financial pressures in our school system. How do you plan to address financial pressure moving forward?
Okay. Well, Aristotle said you can demonstrate the possible by studying the actual. So let me tell you what I did face in Florida that I mentioned about and how that would translate here. When I arrived there, it was 2009, depth of the recession, which was bad for all of us. It was worse for Florida, and it was worse for Brevard as the space shuttle program went away. I mentioned that. We led the nation in foreclosures for a while. But beyond that, in the couple years prior to my arrival, the administration there had used a lot of non-recurring money from textbook reserves, health insurance trust, workers' comp trust to meet operating recurring costs. So not only were we in the hole from an operating revenue and capital revenue, but we had to find a way to get that money back into some of those reserves. So that meant going to work line by line through our budget. And when you do that, you better know your operational expectations and their operational beliefs. Somebody said, don't tell me what you value, show me your budget and show me the way you evaluate people, and I will tell you what you value. So when you have to make hard decisions, they better be based on a foundation of what we're trying to accomplish and how we believe we'll get there. And that's exactly what we did. We cut $63 million of operating expenses during my time there. We also retired $318 million of debt while I was there, maintaining a high bond rating from both Moody's and Standard & Poor's. The other part is you capture efficiencies. We cut $4.5 million of kilowatt hour consumption. We were self-insured. I believe you're self-insured. Cut our steerable emergency room visits by 25%. If you don't think that's a big deal, you should see what that does. In a era where healthcare costs were rising 10%, we actually reduced our cost in health insurance. We had one time in the 6 years that I was there, we raised health insurance costs for our employees. That was $20 a month my first year because the health insurance trust was going to be insolvent. And so then beyond, after capturing efficiencies, it's then can you build revenue? I mentioned our federal lands and I was the chief architect of a formula that I worked 2 years through the Florida legislature to get supplemental pay for districts that were highly affected with federal land. You know that, I'm sure you know that land's not taxed. Well, eventually the second year, it didn't hurt that the Senate Education Appropriations Chair was from Escambia and had Eglin Air Force Base in his district, but we were able to get $2.6 million additional from the legislature. Brevard still gets it, and they're going to get it for a long time because it's tied to military families. We raised dollars for our foundation. I was named by the consortium of foundations in Florida as Star Superintendent of the Year because in really tough economic times, we raised the dollars for our foundation 13%, and those dollars went right back into our classrooms and our schools. So, you know, the fact of the matter is you need to be just as strategic on the way up. If there's a little bit of additional dollars, I cut budget every year I was in Florida. I got to Plano and we had a lot of money, so we wanted to be strategic about connecting those dollars to what we say we're trying to accomplish. And that's what we did. You know, 4-year-old program for children in poverty. There was no robotics when I got there. There were 55 teams when I left. We built a teacher store with our foundation. I'll probably talk a little more about that, but I think my time is up for that question.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
My question is, motivating others to follow your lead, especially in the face of resistance, is a key leadership trait. Describe a situation in which you motivated others to follow your lead in the face of resistance. How did you accomplish that?
Yeah, I will, I'll go back, I will go to that teacher evaluation in Florida. And the reason why there was opposition, it was despised. I mean, it came down from the legislature. Teachers certainly didn't believe that they, half of their, evaluation should be measured on one state test score. And so the reality is that what we did is said to everybody, okay, here's what we control, here's what we don't. And as I said, I brought together a focus group of teacher champions and said, you know what, for the half that we do control, let's make it what we believe it should be. And that, again, was that professional goal setting, that good, actionable feedback. Did the same thing, quite frankly. I go to Texas, and they're in the midst of having to change teacher evaluation, only we could do it however we wanted. Well, if you go into classrooms in Plano now, you'll see QR codes on the door. And what those are, they are so committed to the goals that they've created. If you observe them, whether you're a colleague or a peer, you can just put your device on the QR code. It says, this is my goal, this is what I'm trying to attack, and this is what I'd like you to help me with. And so, but going back to Brevard, and I promised them we would continue to do our best with the legislature. I went there and got permission to attach. Florida has a bottom quartile, which it's a growth measure for kids who are in the bottom quartile performance. And I asked for permission to tie the scores of those kids to collaborative teams that we had in our schools. And so every kid was in that group was connected to collaborative teams in our schools for the sole purpose of building relationships with them. No child should walk through our schools and nobody knows them, right? And so what did you find? Their discipline data went down, their attendance got better, their test scores went up, and it wasn't about tutoring them. We didn't expect our collaborative teams to do any of that. It was just stay connected with kids. When they got a B on a test, that's what I'm talking about. I know, do all you can, or when you don't turn your homework in, ask them why. So we were able to get permission to do that. In some cases, I just did creative insubordination. And in other cases, we asked for permission to do what we felt was right. And our teachers believed that we were going to do the best we could to do this the right way. And I think you see the data that I sent you from Plano, how teachers felt. They feel valued and supported by their school administration. That went up in a time where we got more focused on evaluation.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Newman?
Thank you, Mr. President. Welcome to Bossier Parish and Bossier City. Glad to have you over here. Thanks for making the trip.
Thank you.
All right. Been talking a lot about traditional education. My question revolves more around career technical education, vocational education, and Jumpstart. I'd like to hear from you as far as if you think the vocational and technical education is as important, less important, or equally important. And based on your answer, please give some insight.
Okay. Well, I guess I'd say equally important in that they are part of, our deal should be that we want our kids to pursue excellence in wherever their interests or their passions take them, okay? So I mentioned in both Plano and Brevard particularly, I was there for 6 years. I sent you the data. We drove up our industry certification participation while their success on those tests went up. We in tough economic times, we built an environmental water treatment academy in one of our high schools because in Florida, the Speaker of the House, when he was asked what's the biggest challenge Florida has in the next 2 decades, he just said water. And so that was a huge burgeoning field. we were the first district to have that kind of program. We really got highly engaged in advanced manufacturing and precision machining, and that, quite frankly, Bossier Parish Community College has a advanced manufacturing mechatronics program. That is not your daddy's shop class. It is highly technical work that they can't find enough people to do it, and it is a wide open field. So I will tell you that in Florida, the legislature did pay you if your kids were successful in industry certification. We paid for every kid to take an industry certification test. Part of it is we wanted to know that we were delivering it in the way that it needed to be. Let me throw another piece of data out. There were only 14 kids in last year I was in Florida that passed the Chief Architect Certification Award. We had all 14 of them. So we spent $250,000 making sure kids got the test, but we became so successful the legislature paid us $1.2 million. Now that had to go right back into CTE programs. But I mean, we would do it without that though, because it's just an important part. In Plano, we enhanced our, we already had a health science academy, but there's biomedical science and things that are not, they're not at the bedside, but that are in our medical professions. So it's an area that we have to be in touch with, what's out there for kids. We used an interlink study to kind of see where those high yield, high growth, high pay jobs, and what are the technical skills kids need to have to get them.
Thank you.
Am I on time? Am I okay with the time? Okay.
Mr. Buckhouse?
Thank you. Welcome to Bossier City.
Thank you.
Thank you for the years of service that you've provided.
Thank you.
What is your philosophy on delegating authority, and how do you then maintain accountability?
Mm-hmm. Well, let me just say, if you have to micromanage people, you have the wrong people. That's my belief. Now, that doesn't mean a free-for-all. First of all, you got to find the right people, and you have to connect them. They have to believe in the same things that your operational beliefs mean. You have to be good at understanding the skill sets that they need. I would propose an outward-facing succession planning, by the way, which means that as opposed to inward, where somebody's in the queue, go shadow somebody for a day or whatever. That is outward-facing, where every one of our cabinet members and department heads have to, on the website, say, if you're interested in HR, here are some things that are important. Here are things that I'm reading. Here are organizations you probably should look at research. Here's some research. You can even create project teams that have maybe you're going to do something in HR that we need. Here's the deliverable. You're going to meet 5 times. Or just a learning group that they can do that online with each other. I will tell you another thing. I don't know if any of our people teach adjunct in any university. It's not good form to recruit when you do that. However, if you have an outward-facing succession plan, there's nothing wrong with telling people, well, if you're interested in HR, we have this best practice in our succession planning. If you'd like to become a part or learn on that with us, go ahead, and then people find their way into your organization. You haven't done anything wrong. But again, when I say it's not a free-for-all, just like teachers, goal setting, just like custodians, I ought to do the same work. Where am I strong? Where am I not? How does that connect back to data, what the data are telling us, and what can I do to be better? And then when all of our people do that, especially in cabinet members or whatever, then my responsibility is to stay in touch. Where are we with that? What do you need? What help do you need from me? That's the way it should work everywhere. Our principals need to lead from the middle. It's far easier to lead from the top and be hierarchical and everybody do what I say. there is a paradox of power, and that is you gain a lot by judiciously giving some away. But that takes skill and building a culture where people know that if I'm asked to do something, it's not contrived. You know, don't put people on advisory groups and they know that it's not truly advice. You're better off not even asking. But that's the culture that has to exist all the way through the organization.
Thank you.
Yes.
Ms. Brotherson?
Thank you, President Cheatham. Good afternoon, and
Hi.
welcome to Bossier.
Thank you.
And we're so glad that you're here. And my question is, what do you see as the 3 biggest challenges facing teachers today? And what would you do as the new superintendent that you could do to support those teachers with those challenges?
Well, I won't be repetitive. I mean, one of the challenges is they certainly feel that some of the, and they're not wrong, that some of the evaluation decisions that have been made above them are in many cases born more out of ideology than they are out of real educational benefit. That's one challenge. So I've already spoke to how we would try to make a difference. You know, the stuff that I mentioned, goal setting and all that, that sounds wonderful, but there's some teacher sitting behind me that says, okay, where's the time? That's a challenge that they have. I will tell you, in the last budget I built in Plano, we put $1 million in there to have subs that would deliver high-quality lessons while teachers could then come out of the classroom, plan with each other, and work on their own personal goal setting, so that they're not having to do that, you know, at 9:45 at night after they put their own children to bed and everything. So, you know, creating that time and making it real, that when we're asking you to exercise leadership, situational leadership, if you look at the teacher survey data I sent you, that's one of the questions on there, and we were glad to see that our teachers felt like they had more situational leadership. I guess that's the second thing, and I know from a Bossier Parish standpoint, May 4th is a big day, and so obviously if we feel like our compensation doesn't put us in a competitive category, then we have to deal with that. Hopefully that'll be successful, and regardless, the more we can really look at the way we do spend our dollars and try to connect them. Let me say this related to that. In both Brevard and in Plano, one commonality about the budget is we spent more per student on the instruction, the state required instruction category, more than the state average, and less than the state average in every other category. And that wasn't by accident. To try to make sure that as best we could, the dollars connected to the mission.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Dean?
Thank you. Welcome to Bossier.
Thank you.
And you probably answered some part of this question.
good.
But as
Ms. Smith, you're
superintendent-
next. No, I'm next.
As superintendent, what would you do about a marginally effective teacher and/or administrator after you've gone through all the stuff that you've given them that still have problems?
Yeah. Well, you know, one of the things about the evaluation work that I talked about, remember I said if this is about building capacity, then we should be serious about if we give them the opportunity to do that goal setting and then create a good professional learning support. You know, I went online here and well, we just want to know that we have people that give them support. So if you're good in that regard, if people don't care, then I have very little tolerance for that. Now, that is rare. That is rare. And if on the other hand, you know, I care deeply, but I need to build my skills, then we need to make sure that we have a culture that allows that and creates that. I've used the phrase a lot, and I'll use it again, teachers who learn with and from each other. one of the things, you use your technology, and if you get it, a good, reflective, high-quality goal setting for those teachers, and the first thing is nobody should see it as a bad career move to say, hey, I'm not as strong in this. Could somebody help me with that? If that's a bad career move, that's a failure in leadership, starting with me. So if we build that, and let's say we have 15 teachers in 9 different elementary schools that are all trying to strengthen some aspect of guided reading or whatever, then why not put them together in a digital goal group and allow them to continue that conversation to build their skill set. You can create good mentoring and onboarding, but as much as you can do to build that culture, it is rare where you do a good job recruiting, you find a teacher who cares deeply, you put them in that kind of culture, you give them that kind of support, that they, over 2 years, they just say, I can't do it. It's rare. Now, some come to that conclusion, but the reality is give them a culture where they can build that skill set and then celebrate that a lot and appreciate that work. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Ms. Smith?
President Cheatham. Good afternoon.
Hi.
I'm the one you've been waiting on.
Yeah. Well, I must be talking a lot because I'm in my second bottle of water here.
Please describe your most difficult day while serving as a superintendent and what you learned from that experience. And also, if you'd please identify a situation in which you and the board had a significant difference of opinion and how resolution was achieved.
Most difficult day. I guess, I mentioned it before, but when I had to testify and defend a decision to close schools that none of us wanted to do, but when you've got way more capacity than you have students, and the decision was, if you don't close these 3 schools, then you take away elementary music programs, which people had done all over Florida. It wasn't required. But we had operational beliefs that said we were going to help our kids pursue excellence, right, in a broad way. So don't say you believe that. And when the time comes to step up and make a very, very difficult decision, you don't have the courage to do it. But the fact that I would have to testify, now the good news is the judge didn't appreciate that I had to either. But it was a tough day to be able to say, this is what we have to do. With regard to our board, and I'm sorry, could you repeat that? A decision that we...
Yeah, just identify a situation in which you and the board had a significant difference of opinion, and how did you reach a compromise?
I guess I would say in Plano that we I think some of the board wanted some academies and things that would go in various places for our elementary school kids, but part of the challenge is we had no 4-year-old program. We had huge gaps in kindergarten readiness. It wasn't hard to see. And by the way, Vanderbilt did a study that said 76% of the gap that exists in education kids bring with them to kindergarten. We're just not very good at closing it. And my feeling was, before we kind of look for, I don't want to characterize it as a shiny academy, but we ought to we've got children who need a high-quality pre-K program. Let's build that, and then ultimately we can build out, and did, as I was leaving, we built an elementary IB school and primary academy and that kind of thing. But we were able to put a 4-year-old program for children in poverty using space that we had in our elementary schools. And we had some principals who were begging for it, because they knew that, I had one that wrote the board in 2007, said there's kids out there, I can bring them in, use classroom space that I have, and build their kindergarten readiness. When I left Plano, we had almost 500 children in poverty, 4-year-old program at 14 different sites. Nobody didn't want to help. Let me make that very clear. Nobody didn't want to help our elementary kids. The question was, how can we best do that? And sometimes, it's tough when you say, well, maybe our job isn't pre-K, but the problem is, if we don't close that kindergarten readiness gap, our job is very difficult up the line. I guess that's one that, but again, everybody wanted the same thing,
Ms. Bales?
Am I still okay with time? Okay.
Mr. Vangeli, it's a
Good
pleasure to make your acquaintance. Over the last week, we solicited questions from our public to ask of all of our candidates. So the next two are from our community.
Okay.
As you mentioned, Bossier Schools does have 2 issues on the May 4th ballot.
Mhm.
If those ballot measures fail, what options would you pursue to increase pay for Bossier Schools staff and to address technology infrastructure needs, since those 2 issues will still exist?
Mm-hmm. Well, the pie is the pie, right? And I basically described to you how we did that in the past, and that's a very difficult. And by the way, when I said line by line through the budget, that was months. That gets like the plains of the Serengeti in there, because it's really easy to say everybody cut 5%. You can do that, but that may not be the strategic right thing to do. So we had to go line by line through that. And if something seemed out of whack with what we said we believe in and what we're trying to attack, then why is that? Sometimes you find cows that were sacred a long time ago, and maybe not so much now. It's a tough process, but then again, capture efficiencies to the best of your ability, generate revenue if you can. I think I saw in some of your schools, I think we are advertising out there, and we can do some things. We did strengthen our marketing to do that, but you just have to then determine how you can use your dollars in a way that can make that difference.
And the second question is, how do you plan to better serve students with disabilities in the parish and help ensure they are accommodated fully so that they can access their education in the least restrictive environment possible for them to learn amongst their same-aged peers?
Yeah. Let me throw one piece of data out to you. When I told you I was state principal of the year. The first year in state testing in Virginia, 8 or 9 middle schools passed in the entire state. We were one of them. By the time I left, about half the middle schools in the state could meet the accreditation standpoint. Our disabled kids, if they had been a school unto themselves, they would have passed. Now, part of that is with our kids who have general learning disabilities, you have to be better. Your special educators have to be content rich, and your regular educators have to be good at creating modifications that are needed for kids. And then you have to have talented teachers. When I said to you, build a residency program, if you find yourself opening the year with vacancies in special education, you have to get really creative. And if you find high caliber, high quality special educators, you better I had the best teacher I've ever seen. Hi, Judy McCallum, if you're looking, was my department chair in special education when I was middle school principal. I let her build the schedule, master schedule, for our special ed students and teachers. And then I built the master schedule around it because I wanted her to do everything she could to put our people, our human resources and our regular resources, material resources, to the best benefit of those young people. It's a challenge, but you know that's generally how we've been able to meet that challenge. And the biggest thing is you've got to get high caliber educators, and they are you got to compete tenaciously for them and keep them when you have them.
Thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Ms. Bales. At this time, you can start your 5-minute closing remarks.
Okay. Boy. I gave you some portfolios around the way there, and that adds to the mountain of data that things that materials I already sent you, and that's just really anybody can say anything. More than anything, I just wanted to share with you artifacts that say these things are hard-won, hard-fought, heartfelt beliefs that I have had for a long time about the way we do this work to make a difference for our teachers and for our kids. And so you'll see artifacts that go back even into my principal days. It is about strengthening teacher leadership and ownership. There was research almost 2 decades ago from a couple educators that it's called Awaken the Sleeping Giant, and that has nothing to do with Pearl Harbor for you historians on the group. It's teacher leadership and ownership, and they made a compelling argument that if you want to help K-12 education, that's the way you need to do it. That was 2 decades ago, and it still stands. I think that I can help you build an innovative, professional teaching culture. And because we've done it everywhere that I've ever been. And as much as anything else, we would love to be a part of the community. And one thing I will say to you, you mentioned for a long time, I gandered at retirement and said, there's no way, I don't do nothing well, quite frankly. But at the same time, I want one more big, important challenge. So what I would say to you is one thing you would not hear from me, that is, you'll never hear, hey, your superintendent's looking at something else. And culture building is years, not months. So I would be in it for the long haul, and we would come and be a part of this community, and I'd work real hard to try to help make a difference ultimately for the children that we serve. And with that, I'll just say thank you for the opportunity. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
How did I do on the time, by the way?
Did great on time.
Yeah, okay.
Everything was good. Thank you so much. We appreciate
Thank you.
all your efforts.
And thank you for this. This is hard work, I know. So thank you on behalf of the community for your effort.
Board members, at this time, we'll take a 5 to 10 minute break, restroom break, get you something to drink, and then we'll come back here at 5:45. Dr. Swinford, I'll kind of give you a quick rundown of how the interview process is going to go, just so you know. We'll start out with 5 minutes. Quite a bit of a trip to get here, but we do appreciate you and we look forward to getting a little bit more knowledge.
My pleasure. So,
You're up.
all right. I'll try to keep it in 5 minutes, but I have a combination of Southerner and New York. So if you duct tape my mouth, I will speak through my elbows. But I'll try to keep it short. But I am a military daughter and a former military wife, and as such, I traveled a lot. Was able to immerse myself in different worlds, and I have those experiences, and I wouldn't change my life for nothing. But I appreciated the South more than anything, and that's why when we retired, this is where we moved to. I feel that this is home. And even if jobs and opportunities have taken my husband and I away from Louisiana, currently we live in New York. We actually live in Staten Island, and you know where they just killed the Gambino family, the head of the Gambino family? We live right there, Top Hill. And we live in Staten Island. My husband works in Manhattan. He has a great job, but at this point in time, he got a little promotion that allows him to work from home. So our thought is, maybe it's time to come back home. I graduated from Inter-American University in Puerto Rico with a bachelor's degree in biology with a minor in chemistry. And then I subsequently went back to school to get my master's and my doctoral degree from NOAA Southeastern. Graduated 4.0 with both of those degrees. I have experience as a teacher, dean of students, assistant principal, as well as director of certified personnel, Caddo Parish, do not hold it against me. Associate superintendent for human resources in East Baton Rouge Parish School System as well. And then I was there for approximately 8 years, and then I moved on to be a superintendent in Vicksburg, Mississippi, and in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. I've always tried to spread my wings a little bit, go to different places. I think that because I was military background, it was kind of easy to pack up and go. Didn't know it was going to be as difficult. Now, mainly because I am the mother of 4, actually I'm the mother of 2, and stepmother of 2 more. And what brings me to Bossier, more than anything, is 3 reasons, and they're called Caleb, Cameron, and Carter. And those are 3 of my grandsons. You graduated Caleb in January of 2019 from Parkway High School. Cameron is still a student in Parkway High School, and my little Carter is at Sun City. I also have 3 more grandchildren in Southern Louisiana. I have an 8-year-old, a 7-year-old, and a 4-year-old, and those are Jason, Riley, and Kaden. Riley is the only girl she'll probably never date in her life, with 5 cousins. That's a little bit about me. I mean, I'm fully bilingual. I speak English and Spanish, and we have a population of Latinos, growing slowly but growing in the area. And I felt that some of the things that I can bring is all my experiences, as well as my bilingualism and my understanding of different cultures and adjusting easy to a military area. And I thought that this would be a pretty good match for me. On the sidebar, I did want to also add that one of my daughters graduated from LSU Shreveport, and she has lived in Bossier since she got married, and you know, this has been home to her. So she's hopeful that I can come here someday. So if it's not to work, it'll probably be for retirement, but Bossier's a great place.
Thank you very much. Mr. Slack, you're up.
Thank you. We'd love to have you back. I have a question I think I already know the answer to. I'm asking, got the wrong glasses. If your application is successful, will you commit to moving to Bossier Parish within 90 days and making Bossier Parish your official domicile? where will you reside? Where you will reside in full-time basis?
Absolutely. There's no problem there. You can tell me, if you tell me next week that I'm your candidate, I'm moving next week. I'll start looking, I'll live with my daughters and start looking for housing and come back. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Mr. Bullard?
Thank you, Mr. President. Welcome, Dr. Swinton.
Thank you, sir.
Apparently, this isn't your first trip to Bossier Parish and Bossier City, but we do welcome you back. My question is, what experience do you have in dealing with litigation issues? Have you ever been named in a lawsuit related to your employment as an educator, either in your official capacity or as an individual? And are you currently involved in any litigation issues, either as a plaintiff or a defendant, either personally or in your professional capacity?
I'm going to start answering that backwards. I am not in any litigation nor named in any of my official capacity, nor personally either. Have I ever been named? I was Associate Superintendent for Human Resources and a Director of Certified Personnel. So I was named in various lawsuits at the time when I occupied those positions. As superintendent, I was always named in lawsuits as well, coming from different areas. Personally, for me, I think I can remember probably very few that I brought them, that I would bring, or that people thought that I would bring them. But most of the time it was just because of my capacity that I was named on the lawsuits. You want to know some examples of those, or
Are there any, were you personally named as a defendant in previous?
No, always as an employee of the district, and for that same reason, my name was always mine, the board, and whoever else was named. Many times we were just released from many of those lawsuits.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Reserve?
Thank you very much. Doctor, thank you for joining us this evening.
Yes, sir, thank you.
I'm very fond of New York, Manhattan, and more fond of coming back home.
Yes.
So, great to have you here. Hope you enjoy your time. My question is simple. We think we have several very good qualified candidates for this position. How can you convince us that you're the person for the job?
One of the things that I have done is I try to stay away from who the other candidates are. So I didn't read anything about them. But what I can tell you is that I believe that I have values and the skills that Bossier needs for the superintendent in order to continue the great job that already has been done in Bossier Parish. And I live that almost firsthand through my grandchildren and watching them. My oldest graduated a semester early. He did high school in 3.5 years. Both of them have gone to the Career Technical School. One of them is certified mechanics, and the other one is doing some work in computers and other areas. So I know that the work that this board has done is very progressive, and I have a lot to offer. I also believe that because I am military background, military daughter, as well as a former military wife, I can empathize with the students. I understand what it is to be transitioning from one place to another. I also understand how difficult it is to finally plant roots in an area. So I think that I can work with those families and I can work with those students and be able to help them in their adjustment and make sure that we have programs in place or modifications in place to meet the needs of those individual students, because they come with difficulties. So it would be something good to look at and make sure that we're meeting their needs. And the difficulties, of course, come with adjustment. Many adjustments in their life, you know. I also believe, because I've been able to turn around districts. When I was a superintendent in Vicksburg, Mississippi, was my first superintendency in 2010. If you look at the data, data doesn't lie. The district was at risk of failing. It was about to be taken over by the state. I was brought in, no experience as superintendent, And in 1 year, we took it out from under the state, and the second year we were a successful school system. And how did I do that? I came in as a change agent. I did look, I put together a team of locals because I was an outsider. So I had to put together a team from teachers, community members, and businesses, and we just started looking at the district and what are we doing? Are we meeting standards? Are we teaching biology when we say it's biology, or are we teaching life science in a biology classroom? Are we teaching algebra in an algebra? Are we teaching, plain math in an algebra classroom? We started looking at different things that was happening around the district. And we were able to bring in professional development and create true professional learning communities where teachers would share their knowledge, expertise. Because I will tell you, we have, and you have here also in Bossier, in every school system, we have the expertise that we need right here within your school system many times. You have master teachers, you have excellent teachers that have a lot to share. And we did some of that because money was not exactly flowing in Mississippi. But we were able in 2 years to take the district from under the state and make it a successful school system. And I'm very proud of that. And even if Bossier does not need to be turned around, which is a great thing, you have a B letter as a qualification, and I think Bossier can be an A+. And I think that I'm your girl for that. I think that I can help you turn around what needs to be turned around. I can identify those areas and be able to work together with the community, businesses, and teachers and this board and serve you and make your vision a reality and take the school system to possibly even be a model school system in the state of Louisiana. Why not? Why should Zachary keep all the pride in that area? I think it belongs somewhere else and we can bring it up here. So I've done that. I've also been able to raise graduation rates. When I look at the test scores of Bossier, it would appear that your B, what drives your B, is the quality of your teachers, and that's a big plus. The qualities of the administrators in the school test scores. So I would come in also and look at why are the test scores at a C level, SAT, SAT, and ACT, as well as test scores, and this is what I see on the website. So I don't know how up to date the information was, but that's what I saw. But I would just look at everything, and I think that because I have that keen ability to look at data and be able to analyze it and be able to come up with some structured plans, and doing those plans alongside others, because I'm very collaborative, especially since I am not from here. I haven't lived in this area for a while. I would definitely be a fool not to be dependent upon the knowledge of those that already live here, as well as the union groups, participation of the union groups as well that are represented in the area. But I think that will set me apart. Oh, I always have to add in there, plus the fact that I am bilingual and I could reach a population that I don't know if as of today, has been engaged in the education of their children.
Well, gracias.
De nada, señor.
Mr. Wiggins?
Thank you, Mr. President. Good evening, Dr. Swinburne. During the break, I had ice cream and I had it in a cone. Glad I did, because you smooth as silk and bad to the bone. However, what would you do to attract and retain the quality of teaching that have always been the hallmark and much of the success of our school system, while at the same time increase significantly the level of diversity in our schools?
I think that let me go back a little bit and say a little bit more about myself to add that. Currently, I am retired. I retired. I thought that I wanted to stay home. Then I went to work in a business. The grass is not greener on the other side, I'll tell you that right now. I'll never do that again. But I want to come back to education. But right now, while I have been applying for jobs here, one of the things that I've done is go back and do a long-term substitution at a school in New Jersey, in Weehawken, New Jersey. I have learned a brand new respect for teachers, and I thought already I had a lot of respect, but the students that I had in the 80s are not the students of the 21st century. And I'm glad I've done this, because I thought I can see firsthand, number one, the difference, their attitudes, their ability also with technology, the strengths and the opportunities that we have with those students. So I wanted to put that up front I have a paper and a pen and I did not write the question. I am so sorry. Can you repeat the question again? Because I went off on a little tangent and I missed your question. I apologize profusely for that.
I was asking, can you attract and retain the quality of teachers we have now? Because that's been the hallmark of our system, as well as increase significantly the diversity within our schools.
Being back in the classroom has been able to bring me back also to recognize that many times as a teacher, all we want is to be treated with respect. And we live in a time right now in which teachers are not exactly being looked upon as professionals. And they are, in my opinion, teachers are the pillars of any community. They hold the future, they create the future leaders. They develop them, create them, and they help them grow in certain areas so that they can be successful in the future. So I believe that in order to attract and retain teachers, a couple of things have to be in place. Bossier already has an opportunity out there that you have something on the ballot to try to increase teacher salaries, and I think that's a great starting point. Because irrelevant, it's not all about money, people say, but money talks. And when you want to attract the best, they're going to go to number one, where they're treated with the most respect. And who shows that respect, not only by making them feel good, but also by compensation. So that is one of the things that I would strongly advise if I would be hired for this position is let's continue monitoring salaries and making sure that we have the highest. Number two, I believe also in the power of professional development, job-embedded professional development within the school system as well as from the outside. But not just because I think an initiative needs to come in. I think that it's very important to talk to our teachers and ask them, what do you need in order for you to be successful? What tools are you lacking? Do I need to bring someone from the outside to help, or do you need materials? And I believe that that usually aligns with the thinking of teachers. Is like, okay, they're bringing this professional development, but I really wanted this. I think that some autonomy needs to be given to principals also to be able to run their schools in a way that is a little bit more independent, where they can actually cultivate their teachers to be the best that they can be, and have some autonomy over their budgets, so they can bring the initiatives that they feel are needed for their teachers to be successful with the students that go to their specific school. So I believe in providing the principal more autonomy. I believe in making sure that our salaries are competitive. I believe that professional development, especially job-embedded professional development, is of utmost important. And last but not least, I believe also in implementing technology. And I think that the teachers appreciate that as well. Bossier does have many technology initiatives, and I applaud you for that as well. And we need to continue building on those. We're living in a world, and I don't know if later on this is going to fit for another question, but we live in a world in which, when you think 20 years ago where we were, what technology looked like, what life looked like, what jobs looked like, and you look at today, and you see all the differences. Now, I look at my grandson. I have a 4-year-old grandson. I also have an 18-year-old grandson. I look at the workforce for my 18-year-old grandson, and I try to imagine what the workforce will look like when my 4-year-old grandson graduates from college. And I can't imagine it. Just based on the last 20 years, how can I predict what the next 20 years? If someone would have told me 20 years ago that I was going to tell Alexa to turn off my TV, I would have said, you're crazy. You know, I would never believe that. Or there I'll be driving in my car and I just say, Google, open the book and read the book. And it starts playing a book for me, and it reads it. You know, because I can't always read. Sometimes I listen to books in the car. Lifelong, always a teacher. Once a teacher, always a teacher. So I believe that as technology keeps on moving on, we need to make sure that the teachers are empowered also with the technology that exists today, because they're trying to prepare the leaders of the future. So teachers need to be able to use and be efficient in the current technology, at least the technology that exists today, so that they can better prepare kids with this technology so that they have a good foundation to build on for the future. So those are some of the kind of things that I would do in order to be able to try to attract and retain teachers. And the most important of all those, of course, always being respected.
Thank you, Dr. The last part of my question was dealing with increasing diversity in our schools. You may have missed that.
In order to increase diversity, I think that one of the things that we can do is make sure that, and I'm sure your HR person is doing that, but targeting some of the colleges where we go recruiting, and make sure that we're finding teachers that meet the general demographics of our school, especially of our schools, but at the specific school, and that kids can see people that look like them, but not only in lower positions, but also as teachers, as administrators, you know, because most of the time when you go to some of the schools, many times we see a weird number. Let's just say, I don't want to be rude, but I'm going to say it, I can't find a nicer way of saying it. But many times, minorities are the ones cleaning and cooking, and not many Caucasian doing that. And I believe that we fail sometimes of showing our kids that everyone can achieve. And we don't do that purposely. It's based on who's going to college, what college we were recruiting, who accepted a job in Bossier Parish, who accepted a job in EBR, who accepted a job anywhere else. And we try to attract the best, but again, the schools that are paying the highest are always taking the teachers, and we're not actually graduating the large number of teachers that need to be graduating to come to work in our schools. And that is what creates a lot of that disparity in numbers as well, especially in teachers and positions, in professional positions. So I think that we just need to be more serious in how we go out recruiting, what kind of offers we put in front of the teachers, and we need to provide more tools for our HR people to continue doing the successful job that they're doing, but with a different perspective.
Ms. Darby.
Dr. Swinford, thank you for coming.
Yes, ma'am.
We appreciate you taking out your time to come interview for the position. My question, you've answered it, but I'd like you to expound a little bit more on it. I'm going to ask it in a different way, if you will. How will the students, faculty, and staff benefit from you being our superintendent?
They will benefit because, number one, any community that I serve, I fully immerse myself in the community. I'm not just a superintendent or a figure. I like to visit the schools. I like to engage with the students, and I like to participate in the community. When I was superintendent in the Vicksburg Warm School System, I immediately joined the Chamber of Commerce. I also was on the board for Salvation Army. I did a dance for United Way. I got first place on that one. Called it Dancing with the Vicksburg Stars. I got first place. I danced salsa for them. And that was a fundraiser for United Way. When I went to Tuscaloosa, I was a celebrity waiter for Temporary Emergency Services. I also sat on the chamber. I'm a graduate of Leadership Tuscaloosa. I walk for Alzheimer's. My mother died of Alzheimer's. I walk for the Heart Association. My brother and my father died of heart attacks. And I walk for cancer. I'm a cancer survivor at the age of 27. I have ovarian cancer, so I always walk for cancer as well. So I fully engage myself in my community. I engage myself in my schools. I make myself visible and accessible so people can talk to me. I like to listen a lot. I think I'm personable. I like to listen to different opinions. And at the end, if I have to make a decision, I will make the best decision. But you could always count on it being an informed decision. And that I will have plenty of input and feedback from the different groups, from stakeholders. Because I believe that that is my job. My job is to serve, if I would be selected as your superintendent, my job is to serve this board. But each one of you serves a community. So collectively, our job is to serve that community. So it behooves me to be engaged in that community and earn their trust and earn their respect. So I think that that would be one of the most significant benefits of me coming here as superintendent. In answer to your question, I believe that it's the fact that I do immerse myself. I don't wait. I start from the get-go, from day one.
Mr. Vanberg.
Thank you, Mr. President. I can't lie, when we opened up the box with all the resumes in it, we saw Staten Island, I was like, ooh, what is our connection to Bossier? So I completely understand grandkids are a very important part of your life, so thank you for that. My question is, you're probably aware that we're working roughly under the same state funding mechanism that we have for many years, but we're asked to do a lot more with that. With the continual cost of healthcare climbing, curriculum cost increasing, so forth and so forth, we're under some financial pressures. How do you plan to address financial pressure moving forward?
Well, I will tell you this, in the past I've been creative in trying to find ways to or reallocate money or going out and finding different sources. In order to increase programs, when I was in Tuscaloosa, I was very entrepreneurial in forming partnerships, for example, with Mercedes-Benz. And I let my principals also try to formulate some of those partnerships and create some programs in combination with them. We did a program, and I can't remember now the name of the company, but they serviced Mercedes-Benz out in vans, and they were teaching our students logistics, and they were the teachers. We had one teacher of record, of course, but the company came in and taught the kids logistics and warehousing and how to operate forklifts and things like that. And the students, when they finished, the first group of students was approximately 8 students in that small, and it was a small class. It was our trial and error class. And they hired them. They hired them at $40,000 a year, which is quite lucrative for kids graduating out of high school. So many times, in order, you have to be creative with the money that you have. You have to create strong partnership with community and businesses. The reason why I went after Mercedes was because that was another, one of the large employers in our county, in Tuscaloosa. So I made sure also that that program was open to the city schools in Tuscaloosa. It was separated county schools and city schools. I was a superintendent of the county. We invited the city schools, of course, that had to pay their portion. We also opened it for other surrounding smaller districts that couldn't afford a program like that were close to Vance and Brookwood area. Their students also could come to our schools and benefit from that. So it was not only about enriching our students, it was also about enriching our community. So, but again, that was one of the savvy ways of being able to manipulate a budget in a way that we minimize expenditures and be able to maximize its investment. Was working with the community and making sure that our kids benefited as well. Other things that can be done, additional to entrepreneurial approaches, is when you look at the individual expenditures that we have in the 21st century, do we still have textbooks? Do all teachers want textbooks? Well, some of them want digital textbooks. Where are we with computers? Are we on a one-to-one where each child can just have a digital book and individual licenses for them to access their books online instead of carrying those heavy backpacks that break their backs? So there are different things that we can look at in order to be able to minimize some of the costs that are required for us to run a school system. We also need to look at purchases as well as buildings and seeing what we can do in those areas. I mean, what can we move money from one area to another in order to be able to afford our maintenance of buildings, because we build new schools and sometimes we forget there's a cost also to maintaining them to make sure they don't get dilapidated, like the ones that we're replacing. And I don't know, honestly, I don't know if that's a problem that Bossier has, but it was a problem we had in Tuscaloosa and in Vicksburg. In a growing community, you keep on adding new schools and then you're forgetting, wait a minute, but this one over here needs a little bit of help because it's a little old. We want to make sure we keep it because if not, the alumni will be it. So, but those are some of the things that I would do, but it would take, I am aware that the MFP has not changed a whole lot. Teacher salaries have not increased a whole lot either. Right now, teacher salaries are probably under, when you look at cost of living increases, they're probably lower from where they were 10 years ago, if you really do those calculations. But I think that just being creative with budget, sitting down with the board, sitting down with the person overseeing the budget and making sure that we're investing everything wisely.
Thank you, Dr. Swinton.
I just wondering, first of all, I like the Parkway Red and Black, and then you had, I guess, a grandson that graduated from Parkway, so there's a lot. You talked about alumni, and that's where my heart is. I have a daughter there as well, but I'll get to my question now. I just wanted to comment about the Parkway colors for Mr. Masura over there in his airline. Motivating others to follow your lead, especially in the face of resistance is a key leadership trait. Describe a situation in which you motivated others to follow your lead in the face of resistance. How did you accomplish that?
Absolutely. When you're an outsider and you move into Vicksburg, Mississippi, in a school at risk of failing, and you come from the outside with no experience as superintendent, people do kind of look at you like, what does she have to offer? How is she going to turn this around? So that was a very difficult, it was a good opportunity, but a very difficult situation to step into. But I stepped in, immediately. The first thing that I had to do was, of course, immerse myself in the community, make sure that everyone knew me, join the chamber, make sure I became even a board member for a board member on the Chamber of Commerce on 2-year. I also went to Hines Community College, and I served on the board for Hines Community College in Raymond, Mississippi, which served. We had a partnership for Korean technical education classes with them, so I joined their board as well. I think that those are some of the things that start creating those trust bonds for people to be able to work with you. I don't believe that people follow me. I believe that people work with me. I believe in servant leadership. My father, I don't say this too often, but my father was a pastor. And one of the things that he always taught us, he was military, he was a chaplain in the Navy. One of the things that he taught us was, you're not better than anyone. No one's better than you. I truly believe that today. I'm not better than anyone. I work with people, and they walk alongside me. And we all have a common vision. And as long as I work clearly with this board in trying to make your vision a reality, and we all speak the same language, and we're all repeating the same things, and we have the same goals for students, I believe that people will want to work with me. Not for me, but with me. Because they're going to see me engaged, and they're going to see me sitting up in the central office and not in their schools, visiting them and making sure that I know what are their needs and their wants so that I can better serve them. Because that's my job, is to serve. I believe also that that's community and businesses. And for teachers, I'm always a teacher. I will always be a teacher. And for that reason, I always honor my teachers. And I think that if they get to know me, if they get the time to know me and not listen from others, but just talk to me and get to know me, because I'm going to be right, I will be right there for them. I think that they will also want to give 150%, and I know that the teachers here are already given 149 probably, and they'll want to give that extra percent because they're going to see my passion, they're going to see my energy, they're going to see me working, they're going to see me engaged, and they're going to want to do the same. They're going to see me appreciating them and respecting everything from where they come and what they're doing. They want to see, they're going to want to work with me also because they're going to see me working with parents and engaged communities, and at the same time, I'm going to have the teachers back and the principals back. But we'll hold each other accountable, and because of that level of accountability, again, we'll all be able to accomplish a lot of things.
Thank you very much. Mr. Grimm?
Thank you, Mr. President. Welcome, Ms. Woodford. Glad to have you here. My wife is from Vicksburg and Warren County, so and I can relate to coming in as an outsider. Me coming from my parents to Vicksburg. Family goes back quite a ways there, but my daughter graduated from Parkway, so a lot of connections there. My question revolves around something that you've already mentioned, career and technical education and vocation. I'd like to have your opinion on whether or not you thought they were in relation to traditional students, if you thought that they were equal, lesser, or more important, and with your answer, please explain.
Can you repeat? I'm not getting the gist of the question, I'm sorry.
Traditional students versus career technical students and vocational students. So traditional learning university students in comparison to our career technical and vocational students. Do you think they are equals? Do you think one is better than the other per se versus in importance in the system?
I think that's why I wasn't understanding that question very well, because my apologies.
No, it's fine.
I see all students equal. A community cannot survive without car mechanics and plumbers and welders as much as it can survive without lawyers and doctors and engineers. We need a little bit of everything. What makes the difference is that the life of a child is not determined by default. And let me explain what I mean by that. I think that a child goes into the workforce directly from high school because that's what they choose to do, not because by default they can't do anything else. But if a child wants to be a mechanic, they should be able to get that certificate, graduate, and go to work, because that's what they love. They want to be grease monkeys, so be it. I have a grandson that loves to be under a car. Caleb, he loves it. And that's what he's doing now, thanks to y'all. And so I don't see the difference. I think that we need to take each child and be able to nurture them in what they need in order to continue with their career with their hopes and dreams. But make sure that they're not mechanics because they feel that they can't go to college, because those who want to go to college should also be prepared to be able to go to college. And those who go career also need to have the skills necessary just in case in the future. Let's say that my grease monkey grandson who loves to be under cars, but he wants to own his business. Well, he got a great education, and he can go to college to get a business degree, a 2-year degree at least for starters, whenever he feels he's ready to open his own business. And I think that we owe students those opportunities. We owe them access to those opportunities. We have to prepare them. If they want to be lawyers, we need to prepare them to become lawyers. And if they want to be welders, we need to prepare them to be welders. And we need to teach them pride. No one is above anyone. I think that if I don't have the construction workers at my house, I would never have a house. So I see them as equal. And I think that our job as a school system is to provide them equal opportunities to an education and the career that they choose and best prepare them for it.
Thank you. Mr. Blockhouse?
Thank you, President Cheatham, and thank you for coming such a long way. We appreciate you.
My pleasure, sir.
What is your philosophy on delegating authority, and how do you then maintain accountability?
I think that it's important to delegate authority. I think that more people buy into ideas and a vision as well as a mission when they were part of it, when they have participated in it, when they understand it and see others living it. So I believe that through collaboration, we achieve greatness. It can't be done in isolation. A superintendent is never great. The board is never great. The teachers alone are never great. But together, as a collective group, we can help achieve greatness for our students. I went off on a tangent, I'm so sorry. I've done that twice. It's so embarrassing. It's my human side. Can you repeat your question? I'm so sorry. Read it 50 words per second if you have to.
What is your philosophy on delegating authority?
Delegation.
And then how do you maintain accountability?
I think that when you do delegate finally, when you work with people and you collaborate with them, they're going to want to see a product done and they're going to want to see it well done. That's like a teacher in the classroom. Let's say the first 25 kids that they have, that's their product. They're molding that child, they're preparing that child for the future. And every now and then we want to strangle a child. But at the end of the day, we don't. And we do what we have to do in order to be able to bring that child as far as teachers can bring them. And I say we because, as I told you, I'm in the classroom here doing a long-term sub and having a blast. But I think that that's how you also hold the accountability because when you're working alongside them, you're getting regular updates. But at the end of the day, it's almost like having a child. You have to trust them. And at the end, you have to expect that product to come back and you have to make sure that it is adequate and that it meets the intent of what was the original intent, what you set out to see. The only way to do that is by being a part of the team, letting them work it out, coming back and joining the team, giving them the freedom to express themselves, work on it, develop, be innovative, be creative, and then be a part of that final solution with them. But people love ownership. People like feeling a little bit more autonomous. They don't want to be dictated. We live in a time in which teachers need that as well. It doesn't matter what generation. And you do know we have like 5 generations right now in the workplace. But we have to understand those 5 different generations and give each one of them what they need. But at the end of the day, working together and collaborating is the way for you to be able to hold them accountable. when you're down there with them trying to come up with different solutions, they're going to answer back, but they're also going to be careful on how they build those answers. For example, if you're looking at how do we address an ELL population within the school community, well, I would love to go to my ELL kids and ask them, what do you need from us? But I would really also like to hear from the teachers. What do you think, based on this input that we have, feedback we have from the kids, what do you think you need from us also? What can we bring to you for you to be able to be successful with these students? They're saying that this is what they need. This is how they need to be taught. This is what they need from you. What do you need from me to be able to make that possible? And then you give them what they need and you give them the autonomy and then you just expect results. But at the end of the day, again, it comes with treating them with respect. It comes with, being a part of that collaborative team on occasion, but at the same time giving them that freedom to be able to think and be innovative and come up with great ideas.
Thank you very much.
Ms. Brotherson?
Thank you, President Cheatham. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your ideas and your philosophy tonight with us. We appreciate it. My question is, what do you see as the 3 biggest challenges facing teachers today, and what would you, as the new superintendent, feel can be done to support the teachers with those challenges?
Okay, 3 challenges. And how to support them. That's a loaded question. Teachers face many challenges. Number 1, we live in a time of numbers and accountability. And we're living in a time in which we're almost evaluating teachers based on numbers. And that's a very difficult thing because kids are not numbers and we are labeling them with numbers, but they're not little numbers and they do not come wrapped up in little groups saying these kids are 10, these kids are 9, these kids are 8. So the job of a teacher is so diverse within a classroom setting. And then we hold them accountable for the things that they have no control. So understanding that, number 1, is the best way of supporting the teachers. And being able to have conversations with them and be able to provide them some ideas, some initiatives, and listening to, again, as I said before, listening to what is it that they need for them to be able to continue moving forward with the education of each child that they have in the class, because we do not hold them accountable only for 1 or 2, we hold them accountable for each and every child in their classroom. All those numbers are held together. I think that the second one that teachers right now are battling is respect within not only their own communities, but from the state as well as from a nation. A time in which public education is almost trying to be privatized. And this is not a political campaign, it's just, it's the fact, it's what we see out there. Public education almost becoming privatized. And as a result, I think that people go about it blaming teachers for some of those results, and that students are not achieving instead of looking at circumstances. And we have to work together as a full community. And I think that when we sit down and talk to community members and we ask them to try to recognize, the efforts that the teachers are placing and how can they also better support our teachers and our efforts in educating students, is also a way of supporting our teachers, because at the end of the day, the responsibility of raising these kids is all of us. Many people have used the cliche, it takes a village to raise a child, but it is a reality. Teachers cannot do it alone. There's so many variables that I have no control over, and right now they are being held accountable, and that's a difficult situation to be at. And I think this board can relate to that, because it also comes down to the board. They also look at governments, look at the board. What is the board doing? Where are those test scores of the district? But the board kind of blames the administration. Administration kind of goes to the principal. Principals kind of go to the teachers, and the teachers are stuck with it. So I think that when we go out and better educate also our communities about what accountability is, how we're investing our money, and not only going out there and getting their opinions, but going out there and letting them know you gave us these opinions and this is what we're coming back to you with. I think that also provides support of the teachers. If I would be chosen as your superintendent, I know that the first thing that I would do would be hold some forums, but the first group that I would meet with would be the teachers and ask them, what are your hopes and dreams? What are your needs and wants? And there's a big difference between needs and wants. But what are they? And how can I help you achieve some of those? Because I think that every child is a masterpiece, and I don't think that the teachers get the recognition that they deserve. And I know we always talk about teachers, but I have to throw in there also principals, because I think they don't get it either. And they're there at the schools also battling and supporting. They're trying to support their teachers the best they can and supporting their students the best they can. Thank you.
Mr. Dees?
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you for coming to vote here, and I've enjoyed listening to your answers.
Thank you, sir.
As superintendent, what would you do about a marginally effective teacher and/or administrator?
Y'all, that's loaded questions. That is not fair. I'm just kidding. I will tell you that when you're working with a marginal teacher, the task is never easy. But at the same time, we have to always look at the number of graduates. And when you look at the research, especially here in Louisiana, which I kept kind of my eye on a little bit because it is home and it's where my grandkids are going to school. When you look at the numbers graduating from LSU, Centenary College, and other schools, the numbers are not exactly increasing for teachers. So the best that we can do is recognize those who choose to be in the classroom and want to work in the classroom and try to work with them. Number one, I think that the teacher accepts more feedback when you recognize, number one, their strengths. Instead of coming in and saying, you did this wrong, you did this wrong, are we recognizing the strengths of the teacher? Everyone has a strength. There's a book, you probably read it, Good to Great, that says you have to have the right people on the bus, and once they're on the bus, you have them in the right seat on the bus. And that is something that I always go by. When you look at teachers as well as administrators, do we have them in the right locations? Do we have them teaching the right kids at the right school? What kind of professional development? What are their weaknesses? Can we build upon those? Can we see them as opportunities instead of weaknesses? But what are their strengths, and are we maximizing those? Everyone likes to receive kudos. Everyone likes a pat on the back, and I think that many times we fail at doing that. And I think that before you correct me, I think you should tell me at least that I do something right, you know? But all that said, my background is human resources. I have over 9 years in human resources, and I do believe that teachers can be turned around. It's just finding what motivates them. Is it technology, or the lack of sometimes? Is it professional development? Is it developing a new class or a new course that maybe they're interested in teaching and would just want them to be better at what they do? I always try to find what's the good that people have, because I think that when you build on their strengths, it's easier then to be able to work on their weaknesses or build on the opportunities that we have to help them become better. And that also applies to an administrator. I think that no person, no administrator, no teacher wakes up in the morning and says, I'm going to be a lousy teacher today, or I'm going to be a lousy administrator today. I think they wake up with hopes and dreams, just like all of us, just like each student does too. And something happens along the way. And I think that many times we also have to listen and just pay attention to what are their needs and make sure that we're trying to do whatever we can to meet those. But after we put in place some plans of improvement, plans of professional development, and we've heard what can we do to support, and we've provided the proper support, if some of the behaviors don't change, and we know it's not in the best interest of kids, at that point in time, then we know the actions that we must take need to be a little bit more, not a little, they need to be a little more serious. And I'm not saying necessarily dismissal. There are many steps that we would take before we get there, but eventually it could lead to the dismissal. And if we have to do that, then that's the road that I would take. I will tell you that I'm nice, I'm personable, I'm sweet, I can relate well to people, I can have a good conversation, but at the end of the day, if I gotta fire you, I will.
Thank you.
Ms. Smith?
Thank you, President Cheatham. Good afternoon, Ms. Winfrey. Thank you for your interest in our position in the parish. We have experienced some very difficult days over the past few months. Please describe your most difficult day by serving in the superintendent role and what you learned from that experience. And secondly, please also identify a situation in which you and the board that you worked for had a significant difference of opinion and how compromise was achieved.
In the superintendency, almost every day is a difficult day because you never know what's going to fall on your lap on the day, surprises. I can remember in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, when I was superintendent there, there were a couple of episodes. I'm going to talk about one. In 2013, 2014, there was a big, it was going to snow. The forecast was, it's going to snow, light powder, everything's going to be fine. I trust the news station. My board, a couple of board members, we had a committee meeting that day, so a couple of board members were telling me, you know what, sometimes when they say powder, it snows. And I thought, but this is Alabama. I mean, it doesn't really snow here. So let's just have, let's have school, and then we'll call it if we have to. So our boardroom was similar to this one, no windows outside, so we couldn't see. We were in it used to be a courthouse. So it was like the courtroom is the boardroom. So we couldn't see what was happening outside. And I kid you not, we started that meeting at 8 o'clock, and at 8:45, we had thick snow on the ground. And of course, all the board members are kind of looking at me. We told you so. They can't make me do it, And, so that was one of the times that after I dismissed school, I came back and I said, I'm sorry. I just wanted to show I know this, I can do this, and I really missed the mark that I can't do it alone. I got to do it in collaboration with y'all. Another opportunity that I had was in Vicksburg, and this one was a very difficult one. There was, and I'm not violating anything because this was all over the paper, but there was a person, a coach, who the funds were the accounts for the team were not in order, and the person already had worked for over 33 years as a teacher and as a coach in the school system, and instead of recommending termination, I talked to him about retiring and not coming back instead of filing formal charges in recognition of all the success he had had in the past and the over 30 years of experience. And I brought that recommendation before the board, and it was accepted. The following year, he ran for board member and won. And 3 years later, he's paying what he owed because the case was finally heard. But at that time, I did sit down with him and the board president, and when he was sworn in, and I said, I hope you understand that I did my job, and now you have to do yours sitting in this chair as a board member, as my supervisor. And I hope that we can work towards the welfare of Vicksburg Warren school system and not go back to what happened a year ago. And we had a pretty good relationship for that time. But after speaking with all my board members, that's when I decided actually to leave Vicksburg, and that's when I moved to Tuscaloosa. I felt that if there's any episode of distrust between board member and a superintendent, I think that that's not beneficial for students and not beneficial for the school system. So instead of waiting and sitting there to see what would happen, we all agreed that maybe it's best that I move on. And even if my contract was extended and I got a 5% raise, but I did leave. At the end of the third year, my contract was extended for 4. But that was a real difficult situation because my heart was there. It was my first superintendency, and it was pretty close to Louisiana, where I can come and see my grandkids. Moving to Tuscaloosa was tough. Moving to New York was even worse, but that's a different story.
Thank you.
But those are some tough, really tough decisions.
Thank you.
Ms. Bales?
Good evening, Ms. Winford. Pleasure to make your acquaintance.
Over the last week, we have solicited input from our public. They've submitted questions that they would like to ask of our superintendent candidates. So the next two do come from our community. The first one being, as you are aware and you mentioned earlier in your comments, Bossier Schools has 2 issues on the May 4th ballot. If those ballot measures fail, what options would you pursue to increase pay for Bossier Schools staff, as well as to address technology infrastructure needs, since those 2 issues will still exist?
Absolutely, and that's a real difficult question. I think that one of the things that we need to continue pursuing, irrelevant if it passes or not, is always looking at government and looking at funding and looking at the MFP to see what can be done in order to change that, in order to be able to provide increases for the teachers and recognize the work that they do, because it doesn't get any easier, it only gets more difficult. And the technology, again, earlier I had said, when you look at the world 20 years from now, we cannot predict what technology is going to exist. The least we can do for our children now is to educate them using the technology that currently exists. So it's a legitimate concern that comes from the community, and I applaud them for asking that. I think that, again, we need to continue looking at MFP funding. We need to be creative and entrepreneurial in our approaches. I think that there are many grants out there that we can access for technology, but there are no grants for teacher salaries. So we will need to look at, can we reallocate any additional monies? In the meantime, try to provide a one-time stipend for them, or one-time, I hate to call them bonuses, because it's not a bonus, they earn it. But for lack of a better term, a one-time bonus to recognize their value and their worth until we're able to find other means to increase salaries. And it's not only of teachers, it's of all employees. I think that when we look at teachers, they're the front line in the classroom. But we also have other categories of employees that we also need to look at their salaries. Bus drivers, if they don't bring the kids to school, how can we educate them? Cafeteria workers, if we don't feed them, bring food, how can we educate them? So we need to look at all our salary schedules and make sure that we're providing some kind of incentive, again, so that we can also retain them and maintain competitive salaries. But I would go about it in continuing conversations with state superintendent as well as with the board, any representatives or senators that we can bring in and do some presentations and tell them about our buildings and the technology of the future and how we want to make sure that we're meeting the demands of the workforce of our area. And the only way to do that is by having the proper technology in place for our students and training the teachers in using that technology properly also, because technology is meant to revolutionize how we teach, not only to use technology. So I hope I addressed it the best that I can, but I think that the measure is really, if you would have asked that question another way, I would have said we need to go after a measure to be able to increase our funding. In the absence of that measure, we just have to try to get creative and continue fighting to be able to bring salary increases to all our employees.
Thank you. The second question delves into special education. The question is, how do you plan to better serve students with disabilities in the parish and help ensure they are accommodated fully so that they can access their education in the least restrictive environment possible for them to learn amongst their same aged peers?
I think that when we talk about special education, we're only talking about, are we including gifted and talented, or is it just?
That would all be special education.
Okay, we do include them there. Okay, so we need to continue maximizing our offerings. We need to make sure, number one, that we're continuing to move forward the students that are gifted, talented, accelerated, and make sure that we're challenging them. Again, that requires funding. While also meeting the needs of the students that have more difficulty reading, writing, math, or other physical disabilities that prohibit them from functioning 100% like any other child. I think that the best thing that I would be able to do is to go out there and make sure that, again, as part of being a member of this community, that I will be out there talking to the parents and finding out what do they feel are some of their needs and bringing some ideas to the board based on parental input. Again, also trying to be a little bit more entrepreneurial in our approaches and trying to provide more opportunities for our special education kids to be able to go out there into the workforce, be able to provide them training, preparation, make sure that they are as independent as possible, that they can be able to be self-supporting if that is possible also for the students. That would be some of the ways that I would go about that. But that is a loaded question. I will tell you that. It is so difficult in the time in which IDEA is not even fully funded, and there's talk at the Hill about cutting even further, which I don't think anyone is going to allow that to happen. But there have been conversations about cutting funds from special education to reallocate them to something else, and I hope they don't go about that. We're already short as it is, and our MFP has to kick in to make sure that we're meeting the needs of special education kids. But they are a priority in our community because they are also vested in our community. So we need to do what we need to do for them to be successful.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
At this time, you can do your 5-minute closing statement.
Wow, okay. 5 minutes. I will tell you that I've enjoyed all the questions. I think that Bossier has a lot to offer. I love the fact that your questions have been directed, even if your students have been successful in so many areas, you still have concerns, and you're trying to make sure that those good things that are in place continue. With that in mind, I would say that I understand that I have not been a superintendent in the last couple of years, but I will tell you that I've always been engaged in education, and the work that I did was still working with teachers and attracting teachers and making sure that they were well prepared before they went to work at the schools where we brought them. We were bringing school teachers from Mexico, from Spain, from the Philippines, and India through the company that I worked with. And I'm not trying to promote the company, so the name is on my resume. And so I stayed in touch with what was happening and with curriculum and making sure that I was providing them the training that they needed to be successful. And as such, I think that those experiences will also help me and have enriched my knowledge to be able to be even a better superintendent if I was blessed by being selected by this board as your next superintendent. Again, I think I have the passion. I think I have the energy. I think I have a pretty decent ability to speak and communicate with people. I'm pretty down to earth, and I would be able to engage sections of the community that maybe others have not engaged by language. And I think that I can be as successful as any other superintendent, but I think also because I have that military background and I've been a superintendent for 6 years before and I've turned around school systems, I can help you address some of the needs that are not the majority here in Bossier, but we can still turn around whatever little sections need to be turned around in order to make Bossier an A+ school system. That would be my closing.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate, like I said, I know it was a long trip, but we really appreciate you coming here and spending time with us and answering all of our questions. Your interest in our position. Thank you.
Thank y'all. Thank you for considering me. I truly appreciate it coming before you. Thank you.
Thank you. Board members, at this time, we will take a 10-minute break. 10 minutes. Mr. Newman says 5, we're going to stick with 10. See y'all at 7 o'clock we can start.
Mine wasn't, I guess so.
No, they get
Ms. Poole, we're ready for you. At this time, Ms. Poole has gone to get our third and final candidate of the night, Dr. Clarence Robinson.
Good evening, Dr. Ross. I'll give you a quick rundown on how the interview process is going to begin. We appreciate you being here tonight. Sorry we're running a few minutes behind on getting it started, but what we'll do is we'll have a 5-minute opening remarks that you'll open with here in just a moment. And then each board member will ask you one question. We'll start with Mr. Slack, come around the horseshoe. After we finish our one question, Sonia Mills, our public relations liaison, will ask 2 questions that the community and people entered at our website. So then after those 2 questions, you'll have a 5-minute opportunity for closing statements and remarks. Again, we appreciate you being here, and we look forward to spending the next hour or so with you, getting to know you a little bit. I'll turn it over to you.
Is this on? Good evening, and hello, welcome. I'm glad to be here, and thank you for this opportunity and for the experience. My name is Dr. Michael Robinson. I was born and raised in South Louisiana, Citadel, Louisiana, to be specific. And I was educated in the LaFouche Parish school system. I left Louisiana at a very young age, and I've been gone for about 20 years or so. Due to educational experiences and opportunities, I've transitioned to various states in various positions, and that has really given me opportunities to be able to sit here and speak with you today. I would kind of like to think of this as a conversation more than an interview, as we really get to know each other and really get to talk about some of the things that are pertinent to the district. I come with 21 and a half years of experience. I've been a classroom teacher, elementary and middle and high school, junior high school teacher. I've also, I taught elementary and as well as language arts, English. I also was an assistant principal. High school, had never been in a high school a day of my life other than to graduate, but did very well. And later became an elementary turnaround principal and a middle school turnaround principal. And then an instructional director in Prince George's County Public Schools, where I supervised slightly over 10,000 of the 131,000 scholars that are in the district. We had over 208 schools. I had 14 of the schools on my own. And at times I supervised about 31 of the schools, with my partner sometimes being in and myself being out. And then later became a superintendent of schools, so I have sat in the superintendent of schools seat before. And I'm here today because I am a product of public education But I'm also here today because I'm on the backs and the shoulders of those who paved the way for me. I remember growing up in South Louisiana, right in the sugarcane fields, very rural area, Thibodeau, specifically in the Marydale subdivision, which was one of the toughest neighborhoods to grow up in. But my mom was a teacher, my dad was a bus driver, and they did not expect anything less than excellence from myself as well as my sister. I come from a family of educators. I can thank my 6th grade English teacher, Ms. Page. I can thank my 9th grade teacher, Ms. Smith, my 10th grade English teacher, Ms. Radel, Ms. Reeves, my 11th grade English teacher, and Ms. Toots, my 12th grade English teacher. You're looking at someone that at a very early age, not because my mother did not do her job, but I could not read. I could recite words, but I could not read. And because of those people, the motivation that they gave me, I went on to actually teach English, believe it or not. And one of the best things that I did when I got to Nicholls State University, graduated from Southern University, but I went to Nicholls State University. I was in a remedial reading class, which was the best thing that they could have ever done for me. Ironically, I was in English 101. That happens. We have those scholars in school that are like that. But as a result of the work that those people did with me, I was able to pursue my bachelor's degree, moving on to a master's and a specialist and a doctorate. I've been prepared for this, been through 4 superintendent experiences in terms of the training programs that are out there. University of Texas, I did their certification program. Also the University of Southern California, I did that program, as well as 2 other programs that I did. So I think that I'm very equipped and well prepared to do the work of a superintendent. I'm in education because it's a calling. I believe that young minds, my philosophy is training young minds to become critical thinkers, mature thinkers. And it is essential that you be in education because you really want it. You cannot be in education just because it's a job or just because you're doing it for the money. There isn't any money in education, and we all know that. Our teachers are never paid what they're really worth. But I'm in it because this is my heart's work. I would love to have the opportunity to actually settle down in Louisiana and actually do a career here. And someday, don't know when, it certainly won't be soon, retire here. My mom is here in Louisiana. My family is here. My father passed away 5 years ago, and so I'm really excited to be able to potentially have the opportunity to come back home and spend more time with family and the things that over 21 years that I've pretty much lost. But thank you again for this opportunity, and I look forward to the experience.
Thank you, Dr. Robinson. Mr. Slack, you're up first.
Thank you, President. Chief. Dr. Robinson, welcome to North Louisiana.
Yes, sir.
I believe you spent most of your time in South Louisiana.
I have.
Well, we're glad to have you.
Thank you.
I'm going to ask you a simple question, very easy to answer. I think I know the answer to it, but I'll ask it anyway. If your application is successful, will you commit to moving to Bossier Parish within 90 days, making Bossier Parish your official domicile, where you will reside on a full-time basis?
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Bullard?
Thank you, Mr. President. Good evening, Dr. Robinson.
Good evening.
Nice to see you tonight. Glad you could be with us.
Thank you very much.
What experience do you have in dealing with litigation issues? Now, have you ever been named in a lawsuit related to your employment as an educator, either in your official capacity or as an individual? Are you currently involved in any litigation issues, either as a plaintiff or a defendant, either personally or in your professional capacity?
As a former superintendent, I had entered my district in 2016, and I was given a host of litigation issues that I worked out with the board attorney. And I spent the 2 years that I was there working through many of those cases. There were some that occurred while I was there for various reasons that we worked through. I don't personally have any that I'm involved in terms of me suing someone, no sir. But I have dealt with numerous court cases. Some were settled outside of court, and well, actually most of them were settled outside of court. So I didn't actually have to go to court, but in one of the cases, it was potentially that we would have to go, but that was actually settled outside of court.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. But I've dealt with several of them.
Mr. Bashir?
Thank you very much, and welcome to Bossier.
Thank you, thank you.
My question is, we think we have several good candidates for this position. How can you convince us that you're the man for the job?
Well, I bring 21 and a half years of experience to this seat. I am a former superintendent. I have worked K-12 and just about all the capacities of leadership that one could possibly do. I have had the opportunity to work extensively with schools around turnaround work, trying to improve systemic problems that we had within the district. I actually entered a district where there were pretty much a lack of systems and structures which we had to put in place. So we were sort of rebuilding, rebranding the district. It was a very interesting opportunity, and I'm glad that I had that opportunity to experience some of the things that I did, such as the many litigation cases that we had to address and deal with. But it really afforded me the opportunity to really grow as a professional and be able to, I believe strongly, be able to go anywhere and actually be a superintendent after the experiences that I incurred in my former district. So I believe that I'm fully prepared. I am certainly well-trained, well-groomed for this position. I've had lots of experiences in terms of the preparation programs for our superintendency. So I have made myself a learner, which is something I enjoy doing. I enjoy learning. And I don't just learn just my job. I try to learn multiple jobs throughout the district so that I can understand when I'm speaking to the board in reference to things that we need and why perhaps we're pushing certain issues that we need approved.
Mr. Williams?
Thank you, Mr. President. Dr. Roberts.
Yes, sir.
Welcome to Bossier's Big Dance.
Yes, sir.
We're equal opportunity employers, so you do have a chance.
Thank you.
This is my question. What will you do to attract and retain the quality of teachers that have always been the hallmark and much of the success of our Bossier school system? Why, at the same time, increase significantly the level of diversity in our system?
I have worked in situations where diversity certainly was at the forefront. I believe that we are in a time where diversity, I don't think that you're going to be able to function as a school district without diversity, because there is representation of all races, nationalities in our schools, in our systems. It is important that we understand that when our children are sitting in classrooms, they want to see teachers, they want to see administrators who resemble who they are. And that is very important. That is usually the elephant in the room that most people don't like to talk about. I personally don't have an issue talking about that big elephant in the room because I believe that if we sit down and have a reasoning of the minds, I believe that we can work harmoniously together on a plan to recruit highly qualified teachers. One of the things that, and I faced the same issue in my previous situation, I believe that if we partner with the universities, and I was actually in the discussion stage of talking with some of the university president and vice president rather, sorry, in reference to how we can create programs at the university level. For example, if you have paraprofessionals, believe it or not, some of them really want to be teachers. And if the opportunity presented itself for them to be able to go to school, if there was funding and allowances, and sometimes you can do some of this with some of your federal dollars. I know with NSL dollars, National School Lunch dollars, you can actually use some of that, Title II money, you can actually use some of that for tuition reimbursement. So I think that we really need to be, and I'm a very innovative and creative person. I don't think inside of the box. I'm always thinking outside of the box. And I believe that if we sit down and really think about how we can attract teachers to Bossier, I believe that we could actually do it. But it's going to take more than the school system. We're going to have to get outside of these four walls of this school district and thinking and doing. And we're going to have to partner with those universities. Perhaps having the student teachers come to Bossier and do their student teaching and partnering them with a master teacher who can support them and encourage them and provide them with the things that they need in order to function here in Bossier. Working with, and I did this, working with the realtors in Bossier and some of the banks in Bossier in terms of, and the apartment complexes, in terms of setting a package that would be attractive to young teachers coming to Bossier, because you want to not only bring them here, you want to retain them, but you want to also make sure that they have a place that they're comfortable living and a wage that they're comfortable with. So that's something we will have to certainly visit. There is a national shortage of teachers, but I do believe that when a package is remarkably attractive, I do believe that you can actually get teachers to come to the district. But it's going to take everybody working together. Even myself as a superintendent, I had no issues with going to the table and trying to recruit teachers to come to our district. We had in-house fairs that even though we had state fairs, we also had an in-house fair where, and we call it a talent match, where we would actually invite, people from across the state, out of state, go into the universities. I have no problems doing that, but I'm certain that the head of human capital resources would be. But I have no problems going with them to do that, to attract students that are perhaps in education, getting ready to do student teaching, or who may be in student teaching, to come to Bossier. But I think when we put together a lucrative package, certainly you will be able to attract, young teachers to come here. Certainly the community, as I've read and I've talked to family members who live in this vicinity, there's a lot to do here. And so I think that the entertainment and the culture will be inviting, along with a package, a lucrative package, will be inviting to get people, to attract them, to get them here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Start.
Good evening, Dr. Robinson.
Good evening, Ms. Law.
Welcome to the city of Bossier.
Thank you.
We appreciate you for stopping by and interviewing with us tonight. My question has already basically been asked. And you've answered a portion of it.
Yes.
I might elaborate a minute or two on it. And the question is that how will the students, faculty, and staff benefit from you being our superintendent?
I'm a teacher first, before anything. I'm very hands-on. I will be in schools. One of the things that some of my board members previously, they had to get used to me not being always in the office, because I'm a person who is very, very tangible. I'm hands-on. The students are going to know who I am by name. I'll know them. I will learn them. Believe me. When you have over 10,000, you begin to learn names. I know the teachers and buildings. I know having 32 schools. That is a lot for maybe here, but I'm used to larger districts and even smaller districts. So I will learn people. I think that the more hands-on that I am, the more they will get to know me. They will get to understand the vision that I have that will become our vision, not my vision, because I believe in having advisory committees. And I always like to put people on the advisory committee who people will say, well, you really don't want it to say. No, I want that person on the advisory committee, because they're going to give me a lot of information that's going to help me as a leader to grow, help us as a district to grow. And so it's important for me that I'm out and about, because I'm a people person. In the community, meeting with stakeholders, meeting with teachers, having teachers on advisory committees, having students on advisory committees. I spend a lot of time with students. I refer to them as scholars, but I spend a lot of time with them. So they are going to help me in shaping what the vision is that we're going to have for the district. I can say what I want to say, but until I come in to the district and begin to truly see and understand the dynamics of the district, yes, I've read, but that's not the same as when you come into the district. But when you come in, you begin to partner with people. I believe in building meaningful and genuine relationships. And so it's important that they know that I am not a superintendent who sits in a glass house somewhere. I'm the superintendent that I refer to myself as the people's superintendent. Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Bamberg. Good evening, Dr. Robinson.
Good evening.
Thank you for your interest in our position.
Thank you.
My question is that you're probably aware that we're still working basically under the same MFP for many years, but we're doing much more for our children. Cost of health care is climbing, cost of curriculum is increasing, so on and so on. It's creating financial pressures in the school system. How do you plan to address financial pressures moving forward?
Yes, I had the opportunity to do some reading. That doesn't necessarily mean that I understand everything that I was reading. But I did spend some time reading that and did recognize that there are some financial, I think everybody across the United States is having problems right now. But specifically here, I think that the important piece coming into the district is for me to review the audit, and certainly I would want to work with the person who is over the finances, the CFO, and pertinent leaders within the district. But I definitely would want to sit down with the state to get a clear, delineated understanding of exactly where we are financially. Gone are the days when money was plentiful. We have taxes, which through property taxes, sales taxes, which is pretty much about 41% of what I might be a percentage or two off that Bossier actually gets. That's a large percentage, but it is not enough when you're looking at insurance. I just went through this in my previous district where you really don't ever want to tell employees that you're going to have to take something from them. So you have to look at your budget, and you're gonna have to look at your priorities, the goals that the board is setting for the district, and how we can fund based upon the money that we're receiving. But we also have to look at grants. I do know that about 8% is coming from grants, but that's pretty much how school districts fund a lot of the things, programs, initiatives that go on in the school district. This is not something that I will be able to sit down and do on my own. I wouldn't dare try to do that. It's going to take stakeholder meetings, huge and lengthy discussions, some that may end wonderfully, and some we may walk away still shaking our heads saying we still need to figure out what we're going to do. But putting together a proposal to the board based upon discussions, forums, roundtable discussions that I've had with the community, with all stakeholders, and looking at the budget and looking at how we can do more with even still having less. Now, in doing that, there may have to be some cuts, but I know people don't like that word, but it is a reality, and it is something that you definitely have to look at. I would dare not sit here and say, oh, I will be able to do this, because again, until I get in here and actually look at that budget, and I'm one who's going to look at it line by line, and I want to compare as I looked at some of the financial audit. I want to compare the last 3 years to look at trends. Where can we shift money? I didn't say cut, but where can we shift to be able to still afford to do some of the things that we're currently doing and still provide those services and supports to our schools, our teachers, our administrators, and our community.
Thank you so much.
My question is, motivating others to follow your lead, especially in the face of resistance, is a key leadership trait. Describe a situation in which you motivated others to follow your lead in the face of resistance. How did you accomplish that?
It is really important that as a superintendent that I present, and it's not always easy to do, but it's important that people understand that you're human, and that they understand that you have those good days just like they do and the bad days as well. But it's important that when you build meaningful relationships with people, when they understand the whys, my why of why I'm here is because I want to be a part of a progressive growing district such as Bossier, where as a leader, I have the opportunity to really put a footprint in the sand here, to really help move this district forward. But how do you do that? You do that collaboratively, collectively. It takes everybody working together. I am an avid listener. Many times my principals would say to me, but you never tell us what to do. You just ask a lot of questions. I do. I'm a questioner, because at the end of the day, I want you to get to the answer and be able to make those decisions. I found myself in a situation where there was a lot of resistance because, unfortunately, I was the 5th superintendent in a 9-year span of time. And so coming in, making changes where they were necessary, I did. I got a lot of resistance. When people understand why they're doing something and understand what the end result looks like based upon the vision, because we had a coherence framework, and everything that we did went back to the coherence framework. Our theory of action was a part of that framework. And trying to get people who had not necessarily always had to be accountable to me, to the superintendent, was not easy. When you're telling principals that they can no longer suspend students for dropping a pencil or not coming to class with a pencil, yeah, but they're not prepared. Well, learning readiness is a part of what we do to train. And it took a lot through our principal institutes to work with principals, to help them to understand, taking them to other places so that they can see, having them to partner and talk with each other about what's happening in their school versus someone else's school. It takes a lot of patience, but it is something that can be done. It is something that I experienced firsthand, but it is something that I can tell you that in the end, not everybody was on board, but the majority who were not on board initially became those that supported the vision that I had. Because coming in as a superintendent, you are going to make some decisions that perhaps people don't like. But why are you making those decisions? You always have to explain to people why. Why are you doing something? Why are you telling me that I can't do it this way, but you're suggesting that I do it that way? And I think when people understand, as you do that, you're building those relationships with them. It's sort of the deposits, as Stephen Covey would say. When you're making those deposits, that's what's important. People want to know that you appreciate them and that you value them. And when you do that, even though you're making tough decisions, and I will, but when you make those decisions, people are more supportive of those decisions than they would be if you had not made that effort to make those meaningful relationships. And in the end, again, I didn't have everybody on board in terms of the administrators, but I had far more on board in the end than I did when I started.
Thank you very much. Mr. Newman?
Thank you, Mr. President. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks for driving up and visiting and spending the evening with us.
Thank you.
We talked a lot about traditional university top students. My question focuses more on the career and technical education and vocational students. We all think students are all equal, but the emphasis that the district, state, and the nation has on the career technical vocational students versus those university top students, do you think it's at parity? Do you think one is better treated than the other? And explain your answer, please.
Thank you. A situation that I was actually dealing with in my previous capacity. CTE, Career and Technical Education, is a passion of mine, just as it is STEAM. But it's important for us to understand that's another one of those big elephants in the room that people don't really want to talk about. We are preparing every child, and I'm glad that you make the point, because it is not always equal. And sometimes we have to take a step back and look at maybe what are the variables as to why it may not be equal. Sometimes, and many times, it has a lot to do about with funding. But I think that in order to engage kids, because we want every child to graduate, we want to move the graduation rate from where it is to where we want it to be. But in order for that to happen, we have to put in some interventions and some measures and put those things in place. I think always beginning, well, one of the strategies I like to use is a 5-year plan, where you begin working with those scholars in the middle school. Actually, you really begin career development in elementary school, but specifically putting in those interventions, helping them to decide what it is that they want to do. We recognize that every child, and we need to make sure that we ensure that those children feel valued where they are. I don't want to go to college. And so if I don't want to go to college, doesn't mean that I'm not a good student. I may be one of the best students that you have in the district, but I don't want to go to college. But what do you want to do? Well, give you an example. I walked on the high school campus, met this kid. He says, "Are you the superintendent?" And I said, "Yes." He said, "I just got here, came in from Mississippi." I said, "Welcome." So I began to ask him what was it that what was his plan? Plan A and plan B. And he said, "Well, I want to be an auto mechanic." Immediately, I brought him to the guidance office and asked the guidance counselor to speak with him in reference to his plan. because it was important for him to know that his plan was important to me. Those students have to be exposed to the things that they need. So if you want to be an auto mechanic or you want to be a plumber, why don't we take those kids and partner with the community college here and the technical school here? Why don't we partner with them and having those kids go over and visit so that they can understand what the longevity of their decision will look like for them in terms of academic preparation, and ensuring that the career technical curriculum supports what they need in order for them to graduate, but not just to graduate, but to graduate with the certifications that they need in order to walk into the workforce the day after graduation. So I do believe that in some cases, sometimes and many times this depends upon the superintendent's mindset, and sometimes it depends upon how the board looks at that. I believe that we need to provide as much equity as we possibly can to our scholars who are TOPS potential recipients, but we also need to be looking at those scholars who are going to be the ones that will be fixing our plumbing, doing our electrical work. I was fortunate to be in a district where many of our CTE scholars had the opportunity to actually, and this was a part of what was done through the workforce, where they could, their last 2 years of high school, they actually could go out into the field and they actually built home subdivisions. And whatever their specialty area was, some of them were brick masons, some of them were carpenters, some of them were electricians. They had the opportunity to work. That was a part of their academic curriculum. And they had the opportunity to work with real life people in the community. And that would be something that I would certainly want us to at least entertain a discussion as it relates to those scholars, because I want them to graduate from high school feeling just as good and confident as someone graduating that's a top scholar.
Thank you. Mr. Buckhouse?
Thank you, Chief. I've looked through this pamphlet that you gave us, and I think you probably answered this question in its objectives and goals. But I'm going to ask you a question.
Yes, sir. It's a 90-day plan.
I'd like to hear what you have to say.
Yes, sir.
What is your philosophy on delegating authority, and how do you then maintain accountability?
I am one who believes in accountability. I will hold people accountable. But more importantly, I'm going to hold myself accountable. I have very high expectations, and I have them for myself. And it's important that people understand, because I do communicate this. We are colleagues. Yes, I know that I'm the superintendent. Everybody knows that. I don't have to remind you of that. But we are colleagues. We're working in this and doing this together. When I delegate something to someone, there will be checkpoints that will be put in place where I'm going to want a report on the progress of whatever that task is that I've assigned. I want to know, what do you need from me in order to get it done? How can I be of support to you in getting that taken care of? Because it's important that when you delegate something to someone, that you confidently allow them to do it. Now, if I'm delegating it to you and you're unable to accomplish it, then we need to sit down and talk about why. Perhaps it's a resource that you need in order to accomplish that task. If that's the case, I will provide that. But it's important that when I delegate something to someone, that they understand that there will be an accountability measure in place. For those who are working as direct, where I'm their perhaps direct report, there would be weekly reports that I would want them to provide to me. It may be verbal, where we sit down and talk about it, or it could be something that's written. Because as a superintendent, I believe in keeping the board informed as to what's going on in the district. And so I would provide a weekly report to the board as to the progress that we're making relative to whatever task that we have going on in the district that we're working on. But it's really important that people understand that I'm going to partner with you. But if I delegate this to you, I'm expecting that you can do it and that you will do it. But I'm also wanting you to know that there's going to be an accountability, and some people don't like accountability, especially when someone new comes in, because maybe they were able to do it their way, and maybe coming in, you might have to do it a different way. Or perhaps the way you're doing it is just fine, it's getting, phenomenal results. Why change it if it's working? And so that might be the case, but there will always be consistent conversation around whatever the task is, because I want to make sure that at the end of the day that it does get done and it gets done with excellence.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Ms. Brotherton?
Thank you, President Jim. Welcome, Dr. Robinson.
Thank you.
Thank you for your interest in this job.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
My question, what do you see as the 3 biggest challenges facing teachers today, and what do you, as the new superintendent, feel can be done to support the teachers with those challenges?
I could speak globally about that situation, but I can tell you one of the first things within the 90 days that I will be here. In fact, I can tell you within the first 15 to 30 days that I will be here. I will have met with teachers. Now, I can't make them come to a meeting, but certainly I will invite them to come. Maybe they like door prizes. Teachers love great things. I know that I was a teacher. And it doesn't take always much to get them there, but when they hear that there are going to be door prizes, they're going to come. But it's important for me to hear from them. What are their concerns? What do you need? And how may I be of support in order to help get that done? And I have no problem saying that is something that we will have to look at over an extended period of time. That is not something that I will be able to do because we know that certain things I'm able to perhaps make decisions on, but then there are other things that I need to bring to the board to inform the board and to get board approval, or just to inform the board of what we're doing. I do believe that, globally speaking, discipline and classroom management is one of the top issues that teachers are facing today. That would cause us to look at policy. I'm a very policy-driven person. If the policy says it, then that's what we're going to do. If we don't like the policy, then my job is to come to the board and suggest to the board that we revisit a certain policy. And here are some suggestions based upon what our teachers or stakeholders are saying. And then the decision is that of the board to make as to whether or not the board chooses to change that policy or even revisit that policy. But discipline in classroom management is certainly something that a lot of our teachers are struggling with. Now, I love kids, I love them, and I will do anything that I can to help them, but I'm going to hold them accountable. And I am not going to allow children to disrupt the learning environment for other children as well as the teachers where they cannot teach. Now, trust me, you might say, but you don't have time. I will make time. If I have to sit down with little Johnny and little Mary and their mom, I'm going to do that. I do make house calls too. And I don't have a problem doing that. You might say, but that's not what it is what I do. Because I want the parents to understand that I need your support. Our teachers are struggling because they cannot teach. And if your child is disrupting, I don't want to put your child in school. I need your kid in school. I need to keep our attendance rate where it is and increase it, and our graduation rate. So putting them out of school is not something I want to do. However, we need to look at other alternatives, perhaps PBIS, positive behavior intervention strategies, looking at restorative justice practices. But let me say, you can have all the initiatives you want. If teachers do not feel that the superintendent and those at the top are supporting them, they are not going to execute those initiatives. And thus, whatever was hopeful is going to fail. And so we need the teachers to know that we're supporting them. And so it is important that we look at policy, even if it's just to have a roundtable discussion. It doesn't necessarily mean that the board may change that, but just to have a discussion around the concerns that perhaps the teachers might be having. It's important, I know, even more importantly, that teachers want more money. They really do. But I believe in my heart, and I'm only speaking as a former teacher, if I have some of the things that I know you can provide to me, I know you may not be able to provide more money for me to have a raise or a bonus or some type of incentive, but if there is some type of way that we could talk about an increase, but guess what? You're asking for an increase in the midst of already hard times. So that may not be something that may not be able to happen, but at least we had a discussion around it. Teachers are also wanting professional development and support, especially new teachers. I know I was in a smaller district, so I was able to do, but I was actually able to do some of this even in a district of 131,000 as an instructional director, which that's sort of like an assistant superintendent. But professional development, I did it myself. In many cases, I met with teachers. I wanted to know what their concerns were and how I could help them. Professional development is something that teachers thrive for. They desire to have it. But they don't want you just piling them up with professional development. It has to be meaningful and purposeful so that they're able to go back into their classrooms and actually execute and implement. So it's also important that resources are provided to teachers. But again, I would know that once I meet with teachers to really understand and ask, tell me what your top 3 concerns are, or the top 3 things you wish that you could have in a realistic world, and begin to evolve conversation and discussion right around that and develop a plan, which I would then bring to the board. It may not necessarily mean that it's a board vote has to be on it, but just to inform you. I'm very informative if you haven't figured that out, because I believe if the board is informed, then there are no surprises.
Thank you.
Mr. Dean?
Thank you, Mr. President. Dr. Robinson, I enjoyed listening to your answers, and I especially appreciate your educational journey that you shared with us.
Thank you. Thank you.
My question is, as superintendent, what would you do about a marginally effective teacher and or administrator?
I think it's important because we really want to jump up the ladder of inference. I've had to work at this a lot when I'm looking at instruction, because I visit classrooms, and there will be times when I may take central office staff, which is important that central office be a support to schools. The last thing you want is to have a glass ceiling where the central office is sitting in a glass house and the teachers and administrators are in buildings. They need to see us in the schools. They need to know that we're there to support them. Don't be surprised, because I will be at a teacher collaborative planning, not for punitive reasons, simply that I want to be a part of the team. But what are you going to do as a superintendent? I will do that. Because when teachers have support, they're going to teach better. When leaders have support, they're going to lead better. When the institutes of the professional development that we provide for them is purposeful and meaningful, they can use it. But it's important that they know that they have that, number one. It's also important that teachers, as well as administrators, have the opportunity to grow. How are we providing growth opportunities for them? It does not necessarily mean that we always have to go off to some type of convention. Sometimes you can bring people in to the district who can do professional development to support in-house, as opposed to, because again, we have to look at cost. And so it's important that they know that those opportunities will be provided. But when you have a teacher, and I'm saying that to say because when you have a teacher who has gotten to a place where you're considering them marginal. My first question to the principal, just like my first question to whomever supervises principals, what is the plan for this teacher or this administrator? Where is the plan? I want to see the plan. And I want to talk with you about the plan. I want to look at the strategies. Have you given too many strategies? Perhaps you might need to decrease the number of strategies and the focus that you have. If for a teacher it's classroom management, perhaps planning is an issue. We know that. Because if you're having issues with discipline, management, many times it's a planning issue. Perhaps the activities or the tasks that you're assigning to the students to do, perhaps that task may be beneath where they are. Maybe they need something more challenging. Is it a task that they're having to do that's authentic? Meaning that they're having to create, to develop, in order for them to provide you with a finished product. So when you're looking at what you're calling a marginal teacher, I think that teacher is going to have to be observed by peers as well as by superiors, meaning the principal, the assistant principal, central office people, personnel. And before you just say to a teacher, this is it, we're recommending non-renewal, same thing with an administrator. If a person is trying and has evidence, because I'm very evidence-based, if they are showing evidence that they are trying and they are really trying to improve, I can work with you. I know that even through your improvement, that children are suffering and teachers are suffering if it's an administrator. But before we get to the place where we recommend termination, we will have already placed you on a plan. Now, I always like to do a 30-day intervention plan. That's a freebie. I'm giving you this one for free. And then beyond the 30 days, if you have not improved, then we have to then go on the intensive track, where we then have to put you on a formal plan and go through the formal state process, which could lead to termination or demotion or reassignment.
Great answer. Thank you.
Good evening, Dr. Robinson. Thank you for your preparation and your insight tonight. I've enjoyed it.
Thank you.
But we've all experienced some difficult times over the last few months in our parish. Could you please describe your most difficult day while serving as a superintendent and what you learned from that?
I had a few of those. I can tell you that when you are trying to do the best that you can, and sometimes your best doesn't seem recognized or good enough, that makes you feel that you're less than who you know you really are. And what I've learned through that is I will never allow anyone ever to ever make me feel less than again. I will never allow anyone to make me feel that I'm not good enough or as good as. And it's really important that, going back to relationships, I think it's important that when relationships are built, you can really have an open, honest dialogue and conversation with people around that. But I had to do a lot of reflection when those times occurred, because it's a very lonely world sitting in the superintendent's seat. You can't always go to the board and members and say what you really want to say, in an official capacity. Sometimes it has to be done unofficial, or to those that perhaps you're supervising. But it's important that people understand that as a superintendent, I'm human, and I have human characteristics just like everyone else. And when I have those bad days, I can tell you where you definitely will find me on those days. You're definitely going to find me in a school, because I love to be around children when I'm having what I consider a bad moment or a bad day, because they always go to a kindergarten classroom or a first grader. They always will make you laugh and change your perception for that day. And so I do that, but I know there is such a separation, but I also am a man of great faith. And so I do a lot of praying.
Ms. Bales?
Good evening, Dr. Robinson.
Good evening.
Pleasure to make your acquaintance.
Thank you, likewise.
This past week, we have solicited questions from our public. Community engagement, of course, is very important to Bossier schools. So the next two questions do come from our community.
Okay.
The first one being, as I'm sure you are aware, Bossier schools has 2 issues on the May 4th ballot. If those ballot measures fail, what options would you pursue to increase pay for Bossier school staff and to address technology infrastructure needs, since those issues will still exist?
Going back to the question that I think Mr. Cheatham asked me, someone asked me that question. But going back to that question, we're really going to have to sit down and look at budget, because salaries, as you do the budget, salaries accounts for more than 50 to 80% of your, between 50 to 80% of your budget goes on salaries and benefits. Because everyone wants to be paid, and certainly we want to go to the doctor and know that we have insurance. And so that's really important. But we're going to have to look at realigning funding to, and again, I know the elephant in the room is people don't want to say it, but it happens. You have to look at how you can still maintain the integrity of programs and operations without people feeling it. And it's in the classroom is the last place that I ever want the people to feel the loss or the cuts or the realignment. But it has to happen sometimes. But realigning the budget to perhaps provide the things that people are wanting, increases, or you're having to cover insurances. In my previous district, I had to cover some of that, and that hits your operational budget. And I know that Bossier is protective of the fund balance, because certainly you never know when those rainy days or rainy years may occur, because you don't know what your funding is going to be sometimes, and it's based upon student count, which is your MFP. So really looking at the budget and looking at how we can realign some things. And the last thing you would want to do is to continue to keep dipping into that reserve to be able to still do some of those things. But if that's something that, because I was sort of reading that, and if that's something that we're going to be facing, certainly that's going to be an immediate action that is going to have to occur. And we're definitely going to have to look at how we are looking at that budget and realignment.
Thank you. The next question delves into special education. How do you plan to better serve students with disabilities in the parish and help ensure they are accommodated fully so that they can access their education in the least restrictive environment possible for them to learn amongst their same-aged peers?
There is no reason why ESOL, special education, scholars do not receive equitable support. That's a funding issue. The funding is there. I know that it gets cut. I do know that. And everyone is kind of experiencing that. However, looking at the goals that the district has and looking at the needs, so certainly I would be immediately talking with the director of special education and the assistant superintendent that supervises that. But we would definitely need to sit down and look at funding, because you're receiving the funding, but we need to look at how it's being allocated and what is it being allocated on. How are we providing? So if special education scholars or in inclusion classrooms, you want them to be able to have the necessary necessities that they need in order to function so that they are in an equitable situation, a least restrictive environment. I'm very passionate about many things, but I know, because I have family members who fall in that category, and it is very important that they are receiving equitable support. And so that's something that we need to look at. And again, it all goes back to realignment. It all goes back to the plan that we have for the district, the improvement plan. It goes back to the budget.
Thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
At this time, Dr. Robinson, you can do your 5-minute closing statement.
Thank you. It has certainly been a pleasure being here with you tonight. Thank you for welcoming me to Bossier. It was exciting to come to Shreveport, to Bossier. I actually had never been here before, so heard a lot about it, and so I actually wanted to come earlier and kind of spend some time, because I like to get out in the community and really talk to people and really hear their views on things in the school district and how we can certainly make things better. My focus is to make Bossier the premier district in the state. I'm very competitive in a positive and good way. I don't like to lose, and so I always want to be first. And so it's important, and that's in a fun way, because when you have that attitude, that motivates those that are following you. And I think that I have prepared myself adequately over these 21 and a half years, being a teacher, being an administrator, being a principal leader, instructional director, which again I said is sort of like being an assistant superintendent on that level, executive level, and being a former superintendent. I'm very passionate about the work that I do. I'm not trying to get to this position just to sit in a superintendent position and say, well, I made it. No, I'm here because I owe a debt to those who helped motivate me and helped to support me. I still remember Mr. Gary Batten, who was my principal, and he later went on to become the assistant superintendent of LaFouche Parish. Unfortunately, he is no longer with us, but he motivated me because I never had a desire to ever be anything other than a teacher. And he would put me in positions and send me to meetings where I had to come back and re-deliver, and that felt pretty good. And I began to really see what he was saying to me, that I could be a leader. And so as I moved out of the classroom and became a leader, and finally a leader of a district, I'm passionate about the work for children. My heart is in this work. This is ministry work for me, and I believe in what I'm doing. I'm no different today interviewing with you and speaking with you than I will be on day one of the first day that I report to work. This is who I am. I'm a very innovative and creative person. I'm very hands-on. I believe in being a part of the community. I was a part of the Rotary and the Kiwanis Club and of the Chamber of Commerce. I believe in being a part of the community. I know that perhaps sometimes when you see people from the outside that may be interviewing for jobs and you're saying, but you know, we have something going here and they're maybe not going to know how we're doing what we do. We learn. I've been to different states. You learn. You learn quickly. The culture, the dynamics, the expectations, and you get to work. And I'm a fast learner. I'm an aggressive learner, meaning that I'm not going to spend any time saying I don't know. When you ask me a question, I'll be able to respond to that because I believe in reading. I believe in using my resources and utilizing people around me to educate me so that I'm able to intellectually and articulately speak to you about the questions that you perhaps may have. I'm saying to you, give me the opportunity to come into Bossier. I bring a wealth of experience and knowledge. I know that it may be different, but give me the opportunity, entertain the opportunity of me coming here and being a part of the community. I would love the opportunity to be here in a community where it's a people-oriented community. And I heard that from many people that I asked about and friends that I have that live in the vicinity. So although I perhaps may not have been here personally, vicariously, I think that I have been here a very long time. And it's nothing like being back in Louisiana soil. It's just something, and Mardi Gras was one of my favorite times, so I enjoyed that. But I would love the opportunity to serve as your next superintendent of schools. Thank you again so much for the opportunity, for us to have a conversation more than an interview. Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, Dr. Robinson, again, thank you very much. We appreciate you. And this time you can leave board members, like a 10-minute break, about a 5-minute break, and then we'll come back in and resume at that point.
I'm going to tell them here, and then witness me, and I'll just call them. Shane, you looking at Mr. Bamberg is going to tell them.
We'll call it out. Yeah.
So they don't care. Yeah, I had a lot of stuff.
Item 2.4. Item 2.02, consider selection of finalists for superintendent position. At this time, each of you have a document, a ballot sheet in front of you. It says selection of superintendent Bossier Parish Schools, April 2nd, 2019. All 6 of our candidates, their names are on here. You will pick 2 candidates that you would like to see in the finals. At that time, after you have put a check mark next to those 2 candidates' names, you will send those sheets in. And at that point in time, our attorneys will help us call out. We will call out each board member's 2 finalists. They will tally them, and then we will see who our 2 finalists will be. Any questions or comments from board members at this time? Ms. Rosen?
I would just like to say thank you to Mr. Cheatham for putting all this together and keeping us straight, to our attorneys for keeping us straight, but also to the candidates. This is not easy. It's very difficult to come before a board and interview for this important job. You did an excellent job. You have some really good candidates. I'd just like to say thank you to all of them. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rosen. If there's no other comments at this time, please take a second to fill out your sheet and then pass it forward. And at that point, we will allow Mr. Noah to call out each board member's 2 finalists. Mr. Bamberg will also be tallying those as he calls. We'll get that together.
We have 12 ballots that are completed. Mr. Bamberg, Mr. Downey, and Ms. Younger. Mr. Brockhouse, Mr. Downey, Mr. Monero. Ms. Brotherton, Mr. Downey, Mr. Monero. Mr. Bullard, Mr. Downey, Ms. Younger. Mr. Cheatham, Mr. Downey, Ms. Younger. Mr. Harvey, Mr. Downey, Mr. Robinson. Mr. Dean, Mr. Downey, Ms. Younger. Mr. Masura, Mr. Downey, Mr. Monero. Mr. Newman, Mr. Downey, Mr. Monero. Mr. Slack, Mr. Bengali, Mr. Downey. Ms. Smith, Mr. Downey, Mr. Monero. And this is Mr. Wiggins, will be Mr. Downey, Mr. Robinson.
We have tabulated the votes for the 2 finalists. Our first finalist will be Mr. Downey with 12 votes. Our second finalist will be Mr. Monero with 5 votes. And both Mr. Downey and Mr. Monero will be scheduled to come back on Monday, April the 8th. The first interview will be at 4:30. The second interview will be at 5:30 on Monday, April the 8th. At this point in time, do we want to go ahead and draw for the time slot? Do you want, I mean, does the board want to go ahead and give them who's going to go first, who's going to go second? Or we want to just, okay, draw when we get here that day? Okay. That's what we'll do then. So again, at this time, congratulations to Mr. Downey, Mr. Monero, who will both be returning here on April the 8th at 4:30 for our second round of our superintendent interviews. Item 3.01, adjournment of the special session of the board April 2nd.
Motion for adjournment.
Motion by Mr. Slack.
Second.
Second by Mr. Bullard. Please vote. Motion carries. Meeting is adjourned.